Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Find Your Edge. My name is Jordan Nagoli, and I'm your host today, and thank you so much for joining us wherever you are listening or watching in the world. We greatly appreciate it. On today's episode, you've heard about this man many times over the last few years. I have got my coach, trainer, and therapist, Jacob Hamacher, on the show. If you've heard anything about my story, Jacob is one of the people responsible for really giving me my life back, a new lease on life. He's helped me recover from all my back injuries, strengthen my body, understand my body better. And I am truly grateful to him and indebted to him for everything that he's given to me. And today we're going to interview him about his life story and a ton of topics about the health industry. Jacob, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks, man. I'm glad. It's been a long time coming. You and I have worked together twice a week for, almost like exactly 2 years now.
Yeah,
I think.
just about.
Yeah. I'm curious. You have a diverse skill set of what you do. How do you describe to people what you do if you're meeting someone for the first time?
Yeah, so typically I would just say I'm a massage therapist and personal trainer. And then if the conversation goes a little bit farther, we might get into, I've combined the two. So it's kind of an interesting approach where, people come in for massage and then it's kind of naturally gone into the personal training side of things too. So we take what we learned from the massage room, maybe where there may be some weaknesses, and then we go out and we try to train those weaknesses out on the floor.
Yeah. And what would you say is an average day look like for you, or week by week? Because I know each day changes, but what's it look like?
So my schedule's kind of all over the place. I would say most days there's a combination of personal training and massage therapy. I have 3 different massage locations that I work at, and then 2 different gyms. So, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm usually at a couple different locations, and then Tuesday and Thursdays, I'm at a couple other locations there. So just kind of a variety of those 2 things.
Yeah. And just real quick about the massage. A lot of people think of massage as very relaxing. You're falling asleep. It's peaceful music. It can be with yours, but can you give a little deeper description on what you do in those massage sessions?
Yeah, with massage therapy, I think there's a lot of misconceptions on what massage therapy is, or people have different ideas and that kind of thing. I like to make it pretty simple. I'm sure a lot of people have heard, deep tissue massage therapy. They've heard effleurage or like a Swedish massage, right? Or I'm going into a spa setting, different things like that. Sports massage, what's all that stuff mean? And I like to just simplify it into 2 categories. You have a relaxing massage and you have a therapeutic massage. Relaxing is your experience, right? You go in there, like I went with my wife, they actually give you wine, which isn't the best thing when you're circulating your tissue, right? And they'll have you sit down for a little while. They play some music. You're both in a bathrobe. I'm just trying to set the scene here. You can kind of tell where I'm going at. Yeah. It's designed to be an experience, very relaxed setting, and the whole point of it is just to get you very comfortable, I would say, right? And so the whole experience is kind of that vibe. Either, essential oils, the scents, like there's a certain kind of feel to it. And the therapeutic massage, the goal is to change the muscle tissue, right? So if we have a problem, people have heard of trigger point therapy, right? Where it's basically a ball of tissue where like your muscle fibers go out of position and they have to be restored. So we're going in there to change tissue. And so that's not always comfortable. It's not always relaxing. You can attest to that, I'm sure. And so that's where I kind of differentiate between the 2 types of massage.
Yeah. And both are great depending on what you need it for.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then regarding your training, so I know you do obviously one-on-one really detailed coaching with me. Talk to people. I know you coach classes. Give an overview of the training.
As far like with the personal training sessions?
Yeah. Because I know you train bigger classes, one-on-one clients. Yeah.
So with the CrossFit classes, I guess we can get into that later. That's a little bit different. But with the personal training, typically, we start up with a warm-up, some activation work, and then usually we hit a strength or skill piece, and then we'll go into a metabolic conditioning workout. And that's pretty much the flow of all of those training sessions. And depending on who I'm working on or what the goals are with that person, it's going to look a little bit different depending on the person.
So each part of what you're spending your time on is focused around identifying and helping solve pain in people's bodies, strengthening their bodies, and then healing their bodies.
Yes. Yeah. I would say with the personal training session, if we want to dive into it a little bit deeper, the personal training kind of happened by accident. It was never something I intended to do. I never started an intention to personal train. What got me into the whole thing was CrossFit, right? CrossFit got me into massage therapy. CrossFit got me into personal training. So it's kind of like this whole process that's come through and gone full circle. So what I had noticed was people would come to me for soft tissue work, the body work, right? The massage, they come in for that. And we would do several sessions and they were still having problems with what they came in for. And I didn't know how to fix that with any more soft tissue work. And, I'd say, well, have you checked out PT? Have you gone to this? Have you gone to that before? What have you done? What else have you been doing outside of our sessions? And, they would say, well, I've been seeing a PT. I'm like, okay, what exercise have you been doing with them? And they would describe the exercise. I was like, oh, that sounds really good. Like a good exercise. And then, there was one time I just said, hey, why don't you show me that exercise? And so they showed me the exercise and I'm like, oh, well, let's try it this way.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my gosh, that's totally different. And I just found that some healthcare practitioners, some PTs, some physical therapists, they give the correct exercises or a good exercise, but they don't make sure they're done correctly. And so you don't get any benefit out of it, right? So that's something I found was like a missing link in there. And then the real problem with the personal training is now we do that movement correctly, like say an isolation movement, like I'm just going to externally rotate my shoulder. So for those watching, right, I set my shoulder back and I bring my hand out away from my body. Very common for rotator cuff injuries, right? So that's a simple movement that you can do correctly. But now how does that translate to my overhead squat or my jerk? I work with a lot of CrossFitters, right? So they don't only need to be fixed or have, if they do some damage or they tweak something, they don't only need it fixed, but now they have to know how to go back and make sure that doesn't happen again. And so the personal training was a very organic thing that happened because I saw a need of people they were being helped, but they weren't having enough time spent with them to really make sure that they understood the importance of moving correctly. And so that's where the personal training started. And that's where it just kind of happened organically.
Yeah.
So the personal training was never a goal when I started. In fact, it was kind of an afterthought with the branding and the whole name and everything. Yeah.
I never knew that, man. Wow. We've been working together for so many years. That's so interesting. Would you say, and I know you're a very humble guy, and I'm going to brag on you throughout this interview. Would you say you're, what would be the right way to put this? There's not a lot of people that have these different skills and combinations of education. Do you know other people like yourself that have this? Because I think that's probably one of the reasons why I was so attracted to working together. I was like, man, he can massage me. He understands how my body works, and he understands how to be an athlete.
Yeah, I think the combination of my massage therapy and the training does give me an edge in that sort of in the field. But I do know a couple of the therapists I've had the pleasure of working with that also do the same thing. In Florida, actually, she taught me a lot too. There was a therapist I met in Florida, and she was incredible. She did powerlifting, she did training, she does some kind of cross-training, CrossFit kind of workouts. And she had spent her whole life, in the personal training realm. She did that for a while. And so she's really into fitness, also a massage therapist. Incredible, right? And so I've found that having that combination makes you a great therapist because you know exactly when people come in and they want something fixed, you understand what they've been going through. Because a lot of people that come to me at least are, in some kind of fitness regimen. And so you're like, oh yeah, I know what running feels like. Oh, I know what an overhead squat feels like. I know what a push-up feels like. And so when they try to describe pain to you in those different positions or those different exercises, it just gives you a little bit of a insight onto what they're feeling and kind of helps you figure out, okay, well, if it's in that motion, let's take a push-up for an example, right? So if you're doing a push-up and you say, the front of my shoulder hurts, I can go, okay, there's probably a couple mechanisms that might be happening there. Let's see if we can clean up that form. And sometimes people come in with shoulder pain and we don't have to do any body work and they already feel better just because of doing it the right way. And so I feel like the combination of those two skills together, the massage therapy, you're used to fixing people, you're used to finding ways to make people move better, make them feel better. Now you apply that to the movement as well and they're good to go.
Man, I think that was probably one of the biggest things that stuck out to me early on when we started working together was you can do a movement one way it hurts, the other way it doesn't hurt. And it can lead to injury.
Yes, exactly. It's the importance of doing things the right way.
Exactly. Well, we're going to dive into that deeper in the interview for sure.
Okay.
For now, let's go back in time because I am fascinated how you became who you are today and the little bits you shared with me while we trained together over the years. I'm curious to see the rest of it. So take me back in time. Where were you born?
I was born in Lexington, Kentucky.
Nice.
Yeah, my dad was Air Force. And so we moved around quite a bit, every 2 to 4 years. So there's a lot of kind of scrambling around. But yeah, I was born there, and one of my sisters is also born in Kentucky.
And then tell me about your family. How many siblings? Were you guys close growing up? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I have 4 sisters, and I've got 3 brothers.
Wow.
Yep, all from the same parents. Yep, just to get that out. Yep, there. So I'm sandwiched between 4 girls, all the girls. So there's 2 girls before me. There's myself, 2 more girls, and then 3 brothers. So the joke was I prayed for brothers my whole childhood. I was like, I want someone to play with, I want some brothers. I want to play catch with, whatever, the typical, brotherly stuff. And so I prayed for them every year. Every time my mom got pregnant, it was like, all right, my brother, he's coming, And so I waited for a while, and then they all came at the end. And then, there's a little bit of an age gap there. So I eventually I got to play catch and stuff with them. But yeah, that's the joke with that.
So seven siblings. What was it like growing up with 7 siblings?
Oh, it's an adventure. Every day is fun. There's always something going on. To go back to one of your questions, you said we're kind of close. And so I'm pretty close with almost all my siblings. I would say all my siblings, just, all of us becoming adults and going our own kind of separate ways. I'm not as in touch with them, but I would say we're all very close. We do anything for each other. Mm-hmm. We have definitely a strong family bind there. Growing up, since I didn't have any brothers until the end, I was closest with my younger sister, the one right after me. And I would describe her growing up as a tomboy, was down for anything. We used to do army crawls in the backyard. I had a snowsuit. It was a fun story. When we moved to Missouri, we tried to, kind of acclimate to the farming lifestyle, the outdoorsy. Before that, I would consider us like city slickers 100%. So we moved to Missouri. We're out in the country. We're on 6 acres. And I got a pair of camouflage snow pants. So to give you an idea of how much of a tomboy she was, that was the only thing of camouflage I owned. And I wanted to go play Army Rangers in the backyard. Yeah. And so I'd put on my full snowsuit, and we'd be crawling out in the backyard, out in the backfield. And my sister would be crawling right behind me,
It's pretty
joining in. Yeah. It was just a great time. So closest with her, growing up. And then my 3 brothers, once they got older, just hanging out with them, it was just a lot of fun.
So when you think, if I say what was home growing up, is it Missouri?
Yeah, Missouri would be home for sure.
What was farm life like?
Always fun, always something going on. It was kind of, we moved to Missouri when I was 9. So before that, it was Kentucky, Massachusetts, Florida, and then Missouri. Oh, wow. So all those moves happened before I was 9.
So what, every 3 years?
Yeah, ish. I think it was 2 years in Kentucky, 2 years in Massachusetts, 3.5, 4 years in Florida, and then the rest of the time growing up was in Missouri.
Missouri was home.
Yeah, so Missouri definitely feel like home. And then the farm life didn't happen right away because, like I said, we'd been living in, urban environment in the city kind of life. And, we had 6 acres we owned, and then there was 30 acres around us that we didn't own at the time we moved in. So the first couple of years we were there, weren't really into farming, weren't really into anything like that. And then we started meeting some friends in the homeschool community. And so a lot of them, had some land, had some farms, had some livestock, had some chickens, stuff like that. And so, talking with them about stuff, all my buddies, they had like bottle calves and stuff growing up. And so I was like, well, I want to do that kind of stuff.
They had what growing up?
Bottle calves. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-mm. So
it's like basically a cow gets weaned, and they go on. So a lot of times, with meat cows and stuff, the calf's born and then they just live with their mother. Well, sometimes a calf or like the mom will die. And so the calf needs to be cared for, and they have to have milk and stuff. So a lot of times either they'll wean them on purpose, or like the mother cow will die. And so they just wean the calf off, and then, kids will bottle feed the milk to it, like a milk formula, basically.
Oh, wow.
Like think of a baby, like with milk formula, same kind of thing. So for whatever reason, if the cow's not receptive and won't feed the young, whatever, then you just do a bottle calf. And so it's a big thing. There's some fairs that do bottle calves. It's kind of a way to include kids into the whole farming agriculture, get them started. Nice. So I always wanted to do something like that. Yeah. And, so that was just one of those things. It kind of happened naturally over time. So after we were in Missouri, I think it was 2 years, the land around us went up for sale. And we wanted to purchase it. And so my dad was able to buy the land around us. And that's when, we really started to dive into the farming and kind of lifestyle like that.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't like cows. So I ended up doing chickens was what we did. We had a big chicken operation every summer where we raised meat chickens.
Wow.
So that was our kind of farming, kind of deep dive into farming there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the physical labor like? I've never done any farm work. I know it's tough on the body.
Yeah, I mean, now with machines, you can do a lot of stuff
Good
with
point.
machines. Like my buddy, he runs a farm, and a lot of his work, they feed him the tractor and stuff like that. But something breaks down. Now you're doing everything by hand or trying to fix the tractor, so it's a whole nother side of physical labor, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for me specifically, I can speak on the chickens. I'm carrying 5-gallon buckets of feed and water, so 30, 40 pounds each, one each hand. And before we had a 4-wheeler or a truck or things to transport the feed and water back and forth, I had a 300-yard walk down to the chicken field. So I'm doing, 8 buckets of water every 3 days, or 8 trips with water every 3 days, and feed daily, back and forth, back and forth.
I'm not even trying to be funny. Is that where farmers carry comes from?
100%.
Farmers walk.
There you go. That's it. I'm sure.
Because the way you just described that.
Yeah, I would imagine that's exactly where it came from. Actually, I
Wow.
don't know if there's an origin story, but yeah, I mean,
It's got to be.
carrying some 5-gallon buckets, carrying a couple things of hay, go to work.
So at that age, were you guys into working out or athletics or anything, or just life was active? So that's what you did.
Life was active. There's actually a joke with my buddies growing up. And it's like, if you got to go to the gym, you're not working hard enough. So there was actually a stereotypical, like, the gym was for... you had to go to, it was a safe thing. You're not working hard enough. Let's just put it that way. Let's keep the PG version here. If you go to the gym, you're just not working hard enough. So our labor was, during the summer, we bale hay. We built fence in the summer, so we're working for different farmers, helping them out, do different things. So yeah, a lot of manual labor, but yeah, I never even dreamed about going into a gym.
Farm strength is something different, man. Like,
it is.
Farmer strength. You told me your brothers came last year. Your brothers never lifted, and he was pulling crazy weight, right?
Yes. He actually didn't do it with me. He did lift heavyweight with me, but that was a different time. He went with one of my buddies, who was a younger brother with one of the guys I worked with back in the day. And he just invited my brother to come out and work out with him. And yeah, I think he pulled over 300-pound deadlift with never working out ever.
That's insane.
In that decent form.
And he's not, he's what, 5'10"?
No, my brother, he's a little taller than me. I think he's probably 5'8", 5'9", and he weighs like 145.
Damn. Yeah.
But my brother is shredded. I mean, he's 6-pack, all abs,
Got the strength.
Oh, yeah. He'd probably beat
strength.
me in a wrestling match or something. He's just so powerful and strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So super active lifestyle growing up, working out on the farm. I didn't realize you homeschooled. Did you homeschool K through 12, or did you go to public school, private school, anything like that?
Yeah, I was homeschooled all through high school. My 2 older siblings, my 2 older sisters, they both went to school, I believe, 1st grade or 2nd grade for my eldest sister, and like kindergarten. So just really early on. And then my parents made the decision that they wanted to homeschool. So they tried it out a little bit with them, enjoyed it. And so every sibling after them was homeschooled, with the exception of my 3 youngest brothers. And they went to not public school. They went to a Christian school, a Catholic school at our church for a year. My mom was a substitute teacher.
Wow.
And they didn't like it. So they went right back to homeschooling. So there was a little stint in there towards the end. My mom, I think, just got tired of my 3 brothers terrorizing the place. So they tried that school out. But, it's just, there was a lot. My brothers would describe it as they were at school wasting most of the time.
100%.
Like, they could do triple the amount of work at home in half the time. And so it just felt like a waste. They weren't able to do as many activities and do extracurricular stuff. And so it wasn't a big decision. They went right back to homeschooling after that little brief stint.
I homeschooled 2nd grade, 9th grade, and 12th grade. So
nice.
Very strange years to homeschool. And I feel like, I don't know if you guys got this too. If you told somebody you homeschooled, they'd look at you differently, like you were a weird kid or socially awkward. I got that a little bit growing up. And I'm curious, did you ever, when you were homeschooling, want to be in school, or you're like, nah, this is great. I'm good.
I longed to go to public school. Yes, in high school specifically. And yeah, I was treated like a weird kid.
Yeah.
But sports has a way of bringing kids closer together. And so I never felt like odd man out with sports. I was on the Catholic basketball school team of basketball when I was 14 and 15. and they never treated me differently for being homeschooled.
That's cool.
It was just, how much effort you put on in the court. That's all they cared about.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a little bit of a stereotype. Usually people think you're either a super smart kid, like you just like ace all your tests and you're that, or like they think you're like socially kind of awkward or a little off. That's kind of what I would say like their first impression would be.
And understandable, because I had met some kids too where I was like, okay, there's merit to these comments now.
100%.
But on the flip side, there's some weird kids everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen. But yeah, that's just interesting. It's also now, because you're 29?
Yes, 29.
So we're a year apart. So this is early 2000s. There's no online school then. Now there is online school for everything. Geez, with COVID and everything, everybody went virtual. So now it's a lot of people homeschool without even realizing it. And they do online school. So that's interesting. What about, so you said you got into basketball. So at what point did you really get into sports or athletics?
I was in sports from age 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Florida, when we lived there, from the age of like 4.5, 5 to 9, I started playing baseball. And down in Florida, they play baseball all year round. So that was my first thing with sports, was baseball. I played exclusively baseball until age 13, 14 with the basketball. Had an opportunity to do that. And one of my close friends played, and I was like, man, this would be kind of fun. And so that's what got me into basketball. And then I played basketball every year from 13 until I graduated high school.
Yeah.
And then baseball kind of got less competitive when I turned 13. There was no real travel leagues in Missouri like there were in Florida. Like Florida, you can go, there's competition every age group. So kind of fell away from baseball. I think there was a couple of years I didn't even play in high school. And then the homeschool team started up another baseball team the last 2 years in high school. So I played again there. So yeah, a combination of baseball and basketball. Those are the two sports I played. And then I had a half a season of soccer filling in for a friend that got hurt. So I didn't play that much. But my dad he's like, I wish you would have played soccer. I think that you have the build for it.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know what that means exactly, but he thought I'd be a good soccer player just with the, endurance. My size, I'm 5'7". Before I started CrossFit, I was 135 pounds. So, I think that's a pretty good soccer player build there.
No,
so,
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And then quick side note, in my research, known as stalking your Instagram for this interview, wiring, you're working a lot with wires and soldering in high school. What jobs do you have?
Yeah, so that picture, I think, was it me standing next to a huge like box with a bunch of wires?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of them, but that specific one stuck out too. And I just kept seeing them.
Yeah. So that was actually my first job out of high school. So all through high school, that's where the farming was in. Like the chicken business I had, I was 15, 16, 17. Maybe even 18. So basically from 15 years on, I had the chicken business. So that was my main source of income. And then I would go like in the summers, bale hay, do stuff like that. So that was my work. I started working at like age 14. So I was working a lot, at that age doing those things. And then my senior year of high school, one of my good friends, again, he worked for a local company back where I worked, where there was 4 brothers that owned the company. And we knew the family very well. And so they were looking for some more help. And my friend's like, hey, I know Jacob. He's put in a good word for me. And they were like, okay, we'll have him come out here and work on there. So they built CNC controls for automated machinery. And they had a couple different, businesses. They did some contract work where they built lathes for this guy called like Lehigh, I believe the name of the company was. And so they would send a lathe, like the cast iron lathe, and then we would do all the wiring in the computer and get everything set up. So we did that. That was one side of the company. And then another side of the company was doing, we built the enclosure and the control unit only. And so we would send those kits out to people to put on their machines. We had a retrofit side of the company where they'd send old machines to us. We would do all the work for them and send them out. So kind of a custom job work there. And then that eventually turned into tech support. So we had tech support for it. And then they had kind of a, what's it called? When you're engineering something, creating, my mind just went blank.
I don't know.
Like your R&D, like your
designing,
troubleshooting, like working with chips and stuff. And so they had a small part of the company that did that and some guys working on that. So there's several parts of the company. The reason I say that is because when I started off, I was basically just, run these wires through here, run these wires over here. And that was on the lathe side of the company. And so started doing that. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was
Mhm.
different. Like working with wiring and stuff, like the electrical circuits is crazy.
Mhm.
And so I know like nothing just going into this. So, they just have me pulling wires through things, cleaning machines, hauling stuff around. And then what was really cool was what they did was the new employees coming in, once they knew I was thinking about kind of sticking around and sticking with it, their dad would teach the employees about circuits and like
Wow.
electronics. So here you go into this like little room on the side of this warehouse, like little shed. Like they have like when I started, they were in this probably 2,000 square foot garage. And, they're moving stuff around to make things fit. And it was mostly that lathe company at the time. And so we just like go into the back corner and their dad is just teaching me about electronics, different circuits, who built a homemade brushless motor, and like it was such a cool thing, just kind of teaching about like basic circuit stuff. And so after that, they built a much larger building up at the top of their road. They lived on a huge farm too. So they built a big building up the top of that road. And then they moved everything up into that location. And so when they were looking for someone to come on more full time, that was in the electrical enclosures. So for those that aren't as familiar, that's the panel you saw with me wiring. So it's usually like an electrical box, and it has all of the wiring to power the machine. And so I started building those, and I eventually took over that department and ran it by myself.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, and so that was my job there. And I want to say it was probably a year and a half in.
Wow.
Or 2 years in, and then I worked there for a total of about 4 years.
Wow.
So it was, I just was fascinated. It was a fun thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm always learning new things, always doing it better. My friend that actually got me started, me and him created some templates to make the process way faster to build an electrical enclosure. So when we started, it was a 2 to 4 day lead time on an electrical box, and we got it down to 6 hours. So I could build a box same day, and we could have it shipped out that day. And that was just building systems for it.
Are you fascinated with how things work?
100%.
I see it now.
100%.
Yeah.
And, there are some parallels between electrical circuits and the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
We are an electrical circuit.
we are, exactly, right? And so the cool thing with the body is there's many systems running in parallel, right? All controlled with the nervous system, but you have nervous system, cardiovascular system, you got the lymphatic system, you got all kinds of stuff going on in your body. So it's like a really complex version. Electricity is a little more like black or white in a lot of ways. But yeah, it was such a fun learning experience to go through all that. Like I really enjoyed it. It was a great job.
Well, just watching you talk about this, the animation on your face, because you've mentioned it before, but never in that detail. And I didn't know you were there for that long.
Mm-hmm.
And I see you apply the same passion to everything else. So that's interesting. At that time, you started right after high school or beginning of high school?
So that was my last year of high school. I was not your best traditional learner. I'll say that.
Yep.
So for me, high school was a drag. Like I love learning, but I don't like being forced to learn things I have no interest in.
Preach, my friend.
So that's what I have a problem with that. So I had a few subjects that took me a while to finish up in high school. And so I started working for them my senior year, and I ended up finishing up a couple subjects that I needed to get done while working there. So it's like my senior year.
Okay.
Yeah, was when I started there.
So kind of a bigger question that might have a longer answer is, what did you think you wanted to do at that point? Was college in the cards? Was working for this company what you're going to do? Yeah, because what I'm trying to see is like, man, who you are today, the path to get there has been a long journey. And each year you've almost added a different skill set, different piece of knowledge, experience. What was going on during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I knew.
Yeah.
That's the short answer is I don't think I knew. But to dive into that, I get very into things. I have a very maybe addictive personality is the right way for it. But like you said, I have a fascination for things. So if I get into something, I want to figure it out. I want to know more about it. I want to dive down into it. So growing up, me and my buddy used to talk like, hey, what do you want to do? And, it's like, oh, I want to be policeman. I think would be fun. It's like you just go through these different ideas of like what you want to do. But I think through high school, realizing I don't really like learning, I didn't really necessarily have a desire to go to college. I didn't think of anything that I wanted to do with a degree that would be valuable. So I'm like, okay, why do I need to go to college? What do I want to do? And then starting at that company, like I said, I was having a great time. And I was like, I'll just see where this goes. And so I kind of went all in on that first job. So I could, if, not getting into too much on what happened with that company, but like eventually I just felt like I got to a point where I couldn't do anything. They weren't going to pay me more for the job I was doing, basically. And I didn't feel like I was being compensated for the work I was doing.
You hit your ceiling.
Yeah, I hit my ceiling at the company. That's a great way to put it. And so, they told me I could do a different job at the company and make more potentially, but they said, as long as you're working in that department, this is what we're going to pay you. That's just what you're worth at that department. And so it kind of hit a ceiling, and that's where the soul searching, I think, began. So yeah, I didn't really want to go to college. Had like some dreams like, that'd kind of be a fun job. And then, as you get older, you start to think about the money and the financial compensation for things. Yeah. So like, all right, a policeman, you can get shot and you only get paid 40 grand a year, right? Or, there's a certain ceiling on certain jobs. And so knowing I didn't want to go to college, knowing that some of those jobs I thought about, as a younger kid were just kind of ideas, I went all in on the wiring. And then once that kind of plateaued, I had just found CrossFit through one of my friends.
Okay.
So that's like my last year and a half working at the wiring company. I'd already been starting CrossFit.
What age do you think that was?
I would have been 20. I started CrossFit before my 21st birthday.
Okay.
So I was working at the lathe company at Mock Motion. That was the company with the brothers. I worked with them from age 17 to age 21, almost 22, I believe.
In Missouri?
In Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the same town I grew up in, or the town just south of where I grew up.
Okay.
And so CrossFit had already started. I loved fitness. I thought it was the coolest thing. Getting into and pushing yourself, like pushing your body to the limits, I thought was so cool. So I'd already started CrossFit, finished up my job, kind of plateaued at the company, and that's where I started to do the soul searching. Man, it's tough going back. Like I'm trying to kind of thought process of kind of like the order of how everything happened. It's so fascinating.
We forget a lot of the times. We forget how things happen. So your transition, you're kind of doing that soul searching. Who introduced you to CrossFit?
Yeah, Paul Frisbee.
Shout out Paul.
Yeah, shout out to Paul. He's an amazing guy. So we had a close family of friends called the Frisbees, and they went to the same church we went to, and our families were super close. Every Sunday we used to have brunch at our house where everyone would come over after church and my dad would make brunch, eggs, toast, bagels, would make a fruit salad. That was always a staple. And so, our friends would come over, and they were one of the families that were over almost every week. Yeah. So we were super close with them. That was Dirk Frisbee, Rebecca Frisbee, and their kids. And then Paul, that's his brother. They didn't come over for the brunch. With us after church, but because our families knew each other, I ended up knowing Paul. And before I got into CrossFit, man, such a circle. So to show you how I met with Paul Rell is before I started CrossFit, I was working at Mock Motion, and I decided it was smart to drink a gallon of soda every day. Okay. So I go from athletic sports.
Stop it.
I go from athletic sports, right? I go from athletic sports to working, I'm working with my hands and stuff all day, but there's no real like super physical labor to it. There's some harder jobs, but I'm just wired with my hands. So I had the great idea that I'm going to save all this money by drinking a gallon of soda a day. So I got one of those half-gallon refillable things from our local, stop and go, and would fill it up with a half a gallon of soda on the way to work and fill it up with a half a gallon of soda on the way home from work. Add ramen noodles as a staple and Taco Bell, and you're a recipe for exploding. So I went from soaking wet, 135 to 146. So 11 pounds on that frame of just like sludge. And then I realized, I probably should be doing something with my body. And so one of the staples with our basketball team was running. And so I was like, well, I should just run. So I started running 3 days a week. And then I gave myself the goal of doing a race that the Frisbees did every year, which was called the Race to the Rocker. And so preparing for that and doing that race is where I got a little bit closer with Paul Frisbee. We had met them outside of there. But yeah, training for that race, ran with him a couple times for it, if I remember correctly. And then he's the one that initially introduced me to CrossFit because he had tried it. We had the first CrossFit gym ever opened up in our town, and he was one of the first guys to try it out. He was like, Jake, I think you'd really like CrossFit.
Wow.
And then his niece went, and then she also told me I should go. And then I tried my first class and got hooked.
What do you think got you hooked into it?
the competitive nature of the working out, the metrics driven data of it, where, you can see your progress over time. Really cool. And there's just nothing that's made me feel that way. Like, I did a workout and I had no energy left in my body. I was sore for 2 weeks straight. Literally every muscle in my entire body. I'd never felt that way. All the sports I'd played, with the homeschool, we didn't really do, we didn't have a weight room or anything, right? So there was never traditional like weightlifting that I know a lot of like football teams and stuff they get exposed to. I wasn't exposed to any of that. So here I'm lifting weights, doing body weight movements all together combined. And I was like, man, there's nothing that makes me feel this way. Yeah. So just took one workout.
What do you think are some misconceptions people have about CrossFit? Because it's definitely out there. There's a whole meme culture, the internet will make fun of it, but it's been life-changing for me in a very positive way. And even I had some notions about it where I'm like, people just get hurt doing this. It's too intense. Yeah, what do you think?
So that one's a big one. If you do CrossFit, you're going to get hurt. Another misconception that's very popular is women say, I don't want to do CrossFit, I'm going to get too bulky. A lot of people, they go, okay, they watch the CrossFit games. That's how they're exposed to it. So they see the CrossFit athletes at the highest level, and they see those physiques. And one, they're like, that's unrealistic for me, is what some people think. Or another one is like, I don't want to look like that. They don't want to look, they don't want to be some females don't want to have a 6-pack ripped abs and what they call manly muscles, whatever that means, right? Like, they don't want to look that way. And so those would probably be the main two. I'm going to get hurt with CrossFit. CrossFit's a cult is another one. And then I would say they look at the highest level of the fitness within CrossFit and they think that's what they should expect from being there, which is not the case. So what you really need to do when you look at CrossFit is, I think it's helpful to actually separate the sport of CrossFit with the methodology of CrossFit. The sport of CrossFit is you're preparing for a week long or 5 days of grueling workouts and competition. Okay. Most bodies cannot handle that volume. And those guys train day in and day out to handle the volume. I'm talking 4, 6, 8 hours a day they train. Or if they're not training, they're recovering, and you don't see that side of it. All right. So those athletes are trying to be the best in the world at fitness, right? But they call CrossFit the sport of fitness for that reason, right? So that's the sport of CrossFit. What you want to do is you want to separate that from CrossFit as a methodology, what it was designed for. A lot of people don't know this, but CrossFit was originally created to fight metabolic disease. That's the whole purpose of CrossFit. It's a nutrition and a lifestyle that is supposed to help fight chronic disease. And metabolic disease is the number one killer in the world, especially the United States, right? You think of type 2 diabetes, you think of cardiovascular disease, right? All these things that derive from metabolic conditions. And so that's what the founder of CrossFit was trying to solve. He was trying to come up with a system to solve the obesity crisis. Because if you think of like the Medicare, if you think of the medical system, most of the stuff they do is they're fighting metabolic disease.
Yeah.
Think of the main causes of death.
Yeah.
What's the main causes of death? Heart attack, stroke, all those go into the same thing. They're all caused from that. And so when you look at it through that lens, it kind of helps people understand like, okay, this is for everybody, right? Because everyone wants to be healthy, right? It would be better if we could, keep away obesity, keep away these other things. And so that was the original intent. And CrossFit does that through nutrition. One, you are what you eat. So if you're not working on your nutrition, it's going to be very hard to hit your goals. So that's a big step. And they follow more of a zone diet kind of a principle. So if you're interested in that, you can kind of look into what they do there. And everyone kind of has their different take on nutrition, but basically eating whole good foods for the body, right? CrossFit's, they have a fitness in 100 words. And part of that is, eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit and no starch, right? So that's their whole thing. So CrossFit's like no sugar is their whole thing. That's what they're all about. So stay away from sugar, and that's what they preach. So that's the one side of it. And the other side of it is through the beauty of their workout programs. It's just a really effective way at keeping the body healthy. So with the fitness side of it, CrossFit is constantly varied functional movement at high intensity. And so they have just proven over the years, like going back to the sports side of it, you have this beautiful program that helps people get healthy. And then it also creates people at the highest fitness level, right? And so that's kind of the beauty of CrossFit. I don't think a lot of people know that that's where it comes from.
I had no idea, and I never thought about it as a sport and a methodology. Because you're right. And I think also sometimes people just they misjudge it. They don't understand it, but if I were to like, if you show people the NBA but then you just show people playing rec basketball or shooting hoops, it's two totally different things.
Right.
Same with any sport. You're looking at the high end professional athletes. Yeah, UFC, everyone's going to get hurt. But I'm a big martial artist. I know people in their 60s, 70s, 80s that do martial arts, that it's great for their body, mind, and soul, but they're not in there fighting. So
Right.
it's a balance between the two. So you were introduced to it. You fell in love with it pretty quickly. Now let's keep going on your journey of, all right, I've discovered this new concept and new reality. You probably got obsessed and dove right into it. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like I said, I love figuring things out, getting into new things. So that first workout,
You're just hooked.
yeah, I can't remember if it was the first workout because they were doing something like an intro course where I think they were teaching us some movements. But one of my first workouts was a workout called Helen, which is a 400-meter run. You come inside, you do 21 kettlebell swings, and then you do 12 pull-ups, 3 rounds of that. And I was destroyed. Like, it was amazing the way my body felt. And I destroyed, I mean, that sounds like kind of a negative connotation, right?
Yeah.
But just like my whole body, I just felt like rejuvenated. Like, it was just like this crazy,
Those
cool
endorphins,
experience.
man.
Endorphins, yeah. I was like, man, I can feel like this just from working out. And so after that, I dove headfirst in. I was watching every YouTube video I could. The cool thing with CrossFit is it has a whole bunch of fitness modalities in one, right? We do gymnastics. We do calisthenics, right? You do Olympic weightlifting. You do powerlifting. You do strongman. So you hit all these different domains of fitness, all these specialties, and we combine them into one fitness program. So the great thing is there's always something to learn. There's always something to challenge your mind, right? Some sports, they just get into the same routine. You just do the same exercises and you're not getting that neurological component as well. So I dove in head first, would watch videos on gymnastics, on Olympic weightlifting. I used to film myself and then compare me to other Olympic weightlifters and like watch their form. And so I would just practice for hours. I remember I was working at the Mock Motion job when I started. So I'd get off work. I'd try to get off work early. I'd go in early and come out. They were pretty flexible with like our work schedule. So I would go in early, get off work at like 3:30. I'd be at the gym at 4:15 for the first class. And I would work out. Then I would stay there all night until they closed. And I would just practice skills. So I'm in there for 3 hours, either just, shooting the shit with somebody or, practicing some of those skills. And so, yeah, I was in the gym constantly. I even went through a phase where I tried 2-a-days. I was eating 5,000 calories a day, trying to put on weight. Like I said, when I started CrossFit, I was 135 pounds. That's what I was in high school. And before I gained the weight, 146, ran again, dropped that weight back down.
Yeah.
Had a brief period where I was doing a little bit of gym work with my buddy for our basketball season. We would go in and do a little bit of lifting ourselves. So I think I worked up to about 140 something before starting CrossFit. And then I wanted to gain some weight to be better at the lifting pieces of CrossFit. So I went through a phase where I was going twice a day, eating 5,000 calories a day, and then half a gallon of milk to try to put on some weight.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I felt like I had to puke all day, every day. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it.
And what's your like normal weight now that you compete at or train at?
Yeah, I've been 168-ish for quite a while. Got a little phase where I was getting a little fluffy. I was up into like the 172. The leanest I've been with CrossFit's about 163.
Yeah.
And I find like 163 to 168, that's a pretty good weight for me to do all the different movements in CrossFit and feel pretty good.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask real quick is, can you talk a little bit about I don't even know if there's a term for this, but let's say you're doing a WOD, you're doing a workout and you're pushing yourself and you want to give up. I want to puke often when we work out. But let's say it's 5 rounds of something. When you are in the space between, I think I've hit my limit and I'm going to push past that, and that mental space where your endorphins are at an all-time high, I don't think people understand they can get there. And and I'm so grateful, one of the things you really helped me see is that I'm able to push myself way farther than I think I can without injury. And that was one of the things I struggled with, is when I got hurt, I would always be afraid of going too far. And it's no secret, people have told me in my life I'm too intense all the time. But for someone to tell me I'm too intense is taking away a piece of my personality. I want to go hard. Do you have any thoughts on that? Speaking on that, of just like really pushing yourself farther than you think you can go.
Yeah, one of CrossFit's things, I keep mentioning because it's just a beautiful program, but I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing of how they word this, but basically right at the point where your form is about to break down, or your form has to break down because you're pushing so hard, that is where adaptation happens. That's a simple way to put it, right? So if you never push yourself to those limits where you think you might fail a rep, or you don't know if it's going to be the prettiest rep, right? That's where the adaptation happens. And so you need to be riding and going into that space and going into that feeling, basically, right? So you want to be pushing yourself almost to failure. You want to get to that point where, I'm suffering and all that stuff, and I come in there. Now, with you specifically, with your situation, you can't afford to have a form breakdown, right? We've dealt with a couple of small setbacks during the journey, right? Because, a little loss of focus here or a little bit there, right? But most people can handle, 1 or 2 reps that aren't perfect. And so that's kind of what you're chasing with that. But as far as getting through it mentally, I think that's part of the journey with CrossFit, right? Is it's learning that it's okay to be uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is not something to be afraid of. Being uncomfortable is where growth happens too. We talk about the adaptation, but that's where growth happens too. So if you're not getting uncomfortable, you probably need to switch up your workout routine a little bit, right? That's where the change happens. And so I don't really know, besides encouraging people, like there's a big community aspect with CrossFit, and you're encouraged to give your best effort and to go as hard as you can and to push every workout to your physical limits. And I think that's the beauty of it, of the community aspect. Yeah. But as far as a mindset, one thing I tell myself is it's okay to hurt. It's okay to be uncomfortable. And not pain, right? Don't push through pain. We're not talking about trying to get injured here, but the muscles filling up with lactic acid. You feel like you can't move anymore. The muscles are starting to shut down. It's like, it's okay. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And I think it's okay to try and fail. It's okay to try if you don't get a lift, if you don't. And you've really shown me this, especially the last few months, is you're not going to be 100% every day you go in the gym. You might come in one day, you slept like shit, you're not feeling great, your mind's elsewhere, but you got in, you showed up. The next week, you might be able to do the same workout 25% faster, 25% better. But it's the process of actually showing up repeatedly, respecting yourself, respecting your body, that rain or shine, baby, you're getting in there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Example was yesterday. I went to the gym. I had back squats and deadlifts programmed. And the night before, I only got 4 hours of sleep. I felt like trash. So I simplified my workout, didn't do my strength, in and out, 12-minute workout, I was done, right?
Boom.
But it was just a perfect example of you don't always feel your best.
Yeah.
Stuff doesn't feel right. And when stuff doesn't feel right, that's where you want to just take a step back. My body was telling me you didn't recover last night. You had a hard week of training. You had a high volume work week, and you just got to take it easy. Yesterday was a perfect example of that. Yeah, you can't expect to be 100% every day.
And I also think, and this is really just going on tangents now, is being in touch with yourself and knowing yourself and knowing like, this is what I need to do for my body, but also not being afraid to push your limits a little bit. And I think mistakes will happen. We have experienced a couple setbacks with my back, but we've learned every time something's happened, we learn from it and we come back stronger and better.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think so, man. Jumping back to your journey, become obsessed with CrossFit. And I mean, you're really a gym rat. And now everything is falling into place in my mind of like, this is why this guy is so good at what he does. When did it transition from I'm just training, I'm having fun, to man, could this be a career? Like what even happened? How did that happen?
Yeah, so the couple that started the CrossFit gym, we became super close very fast. I think they saw like my desire to get good at it, and so they were willing to give me advice and to like push me into the direction like, hey, try this program, try doing this for your squats, try doing that. And so, yeah, shout out to them. I mean, they're the one that started this whole thing. So that's Austin and Danielle Bettigrew. I mean, they were just incredible in part of the stage. Yeah. So again, they saw my passion for it. They saw I was interested. They helped push me in all the right directions, helped me with the journey. And then they were like, hey man, do you want to coach? Because they were looking for other people to start coaching at the gym. And I was like, want to coach? I'm not qualified to coach. She's like, yeah, it's fine, man. Just get your L1. You'll be fine. I'm like, no, I'm not qualified to do that. And then I just did some simple math at the house. I was trying to remember. I think I was paying $100 a month for my CrossFit at the time. So, I was thinking, okay, $1,200 a year. The L1 costs $1,000. So in 10 months, I get my ROI, right? So I was like, if nothing else, I'll get my certificate, coach for a year, and because they were going to give me a free membership for being a coach, which is how a lot of gyms do it.
And what's an L1, by the way, for people that don't know?
CrossFit L1. So that's your first qualification to be a coach.
Okay.
Within the CrossFit space. So there's 4 CrossFit certifications currently. So your CrossFit L1, that's your level 1 course. I would describe it as it's a first step in the methodology They're teaching you what CrossFit is, teaching you about the program, the whole thing with the nutrition. They talk to you about the zone diet. They talk to you about the fundamental movements of CrossFit, and then you go from there. So that was that. And then there's an L2 course, which I would say is more of a how to coach. So the first one's like, here's your methodology. This is what we're trying to teach with CrossFit. This is the importance of all these steps. And then when you go to the CrossFit L2, they're like, okay, but really, are you coaching? Like, here's how you become a coach.
Yeah.
And so it's a deeper dive into like running a class and making sure everyone gets attention. And those coaches that teach those classes are phenomenal. Like, no matter how long you've been doing CrossFit, you'll learn something from being there at those courses. L3 is an online certification, just a test. So you go to a testing facility. It's a 4-hour test. It's a pass-fail. So there's no in-person aspect to that. The other 2 are weekend courses, and the L3 is just a test. And then the last one is an L4, and that is I would call it like an in-person scrutinization. So I don't know exactly how it works. I think that's kind of intended, but basically you go and they judge how well you coach. And I believe that that's the staff, right? So those guys that teach all these courses, I don't know if you take a class with them or if they're there watching, but basically they just pick apart your coaching in person.
That's rough.
Yeah. Not a lot of L4s yet. So that's kind of the stages of that.
Gotcha.
So the first one you have to do in order to coach by yourself at a gym is you have to get to an L1. You can technically coach with an L1 present without being an L1, or you can like kind of be like an apprenticeship kind of into it. But in order to coach at a CrossFit gym solo, you have to have an L1. So that was the first step in the journey. And again, it was a financial thing for me first, and I liked it, right? So it's not like I just did it for that, but that was a big reason on why I started coaching, was because of that. So again, going back to it, I was still working at that company. I had started CrossFit, got hooked, deep dive into it, spending hours a day. From there, got my L1. That was kind of that next step. And then that's where that kind of plateau happened at the company, like we discussed earlier. Mm-hmm. We kind of met the ceiling at the job position I was in, and I knew that it was going to be hard to live on that. And also, I just got really passionate about fitness.
Yeah.
And so that gym eventually closed. Austin and Danielle moved back to Springfield, so they closed down the gym, and another gym had opened called CrossFit MTL. So they helped us all transition over to that gym. And so around the time that transition happened, they needed a full-time coach, and that also did like programming workouts there. And so when that happened, it was kind of like, okay, they need a full-time coach. I'm at a ceiling here at my work. Mm-hmm. I talked to my dad about it, kind of told him what they had told me about being at a ceiling at the company. And he's like, well, if you're at a ceiling and you don't think you're being valued there, then just stop.
Yeah.
He's like, as long as you help out around the house, you can stay there. I was still living with my family at the time. He's like, as long as you help out at the house, you can stay here and you can go, try something else or figure out something else you can do.
Yeah.
And so I transitioned from that job to full-time coaching. So I was coaching morning classes. I would work out for 3 hours. I would coach a teen class, and then I would coach all the evening classes. Then I would clean the gym.
Damn.
So that was my schedule I want to say I did that for about a year, maybe a little less than a year.
22 at this age?
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That would have been 21, 20, about 20, between 22 and 23 would have been.
Okay.
Forget the exact years and the timing of it all.
Yeah,
it was kind of all there, but that was the transition. So that was the first time I was all in on fitness.
I mean, you lived and breathed.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's all you did.
Yes. And the hard part that a lot of people don't realize with personal training and CrossFit and coaching and being at a gym is even if you're not working out the whole time you're at the gym, it is really draining to be in there. You had the loud music, when the people are working out, and then just trying to teach everyone the same thing all day. Like with CrossFit, they're group classes. So you have a workout of the day that you're teaching to the different classes. So if I'm coaching 7 classes in a day, I'm teaching the same thing to 7 classes of people, and you could be teaching 10 people a class, and so say most gyms have, let's say 5-6 classes a day. I'm teaching 60 to 120 people the same thing. It's very monotonous, and just the attention to detail and the focus you need to be a good coach, it's very hard to stay sharp all day. So it's very mentally draining to be doing that. And so that's one thing I realized is like, man, I don't know if I can do this all the time. And the monotony of it can be tough when you're doing those kind of settings.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge I faced. And then honestly, there's not a lot of money in a CrossFit gym. even the best gyms in the world, they make decent money, but it's hard to make a living as like a full-time CrossFit coach. And that's something I found out very quickly because that other source of income was gone. I was just doing that coaching. And so.
And if you're not there, you're not making money.
If you're not there, you're not making money. Exactly. And so it was like I was trying, I loved what I did. It was so fun. It was just exhausting work. And I just felt like I wasn't going to make enough to like, if I ever had to move out of my parents' house, like I didn't plan to live there forever.
Yeah.
But if I ever had to pay for rent and all these other bills, I was like, man, I don't know if I have enough money just doing this one job.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, I really didn't know what else I could do. And I'd left that company. So kind of like another soul searching kind of event happened there. And one thing with me is I am not flexible at all. And so the transition here happened where I'm doing CrossFit all the time, 3 hours a day, living and breathing it. But I really don't understand, the importance of flexibility with training at all. And I went to do a competition with a friend, and there was a triple overhead squat. So people who don't know, you have a bar overhead, locked out, and you have to squat 3 times with it. It was a 3-rep max. And I was trying to do 225, which I'd never done before. And in one of the reps, I just felt something weird through my elbow. So I dropped the bar. That was it. I did one more workout, I think. I forget what was in it. But like that night, I felt horrible. My elbow was just in so much pain. And I couldn't really work out at all. I couldn't grab the bar, couldn't do anything. I tried to do a workout the next week, and like my arm wasn't working well. And then it kind of felt like it was in my shoulder, and it was just kind of radiating down to my elbow. So I just got this huge injury. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to fix it or anything else. So what did I do? I went back and did the old YouTube search. And I actually ended up finding a guy that did physical therapy out of a CrossFit gym in California. His name was Kelly Starrett. And he is just a genius with movement in the body. And I didn't know this at the time, but he had done a bunch of work with CrossFit.com on different courses and stuff. But anyway, I found his stuff and rehabbed my own shoulder and elbow. I actually never know what happened. I never got it officially checked. I don't know if something got torn. Again, it started with elbow pain and ended up in my shoulder. And so one of the stuff he talks about is just restoring tissue back to its to where it should be. And so, we got into soft tissue work, a lot of rolling, and a lot of just opening up different positions. And at the time, I didn't even really know what I was doing. I would just go on there, watch his videos, do some stuff, trial and error, and eventually got to the point where I was back to working out again. It took me about 2 months. And so after that, I was like, okay, this is some voodoo magic.
Yeah.
I was like, how did I go from not being able to pick anything up, extreme pain in my shoulder and elbow, to now being able to go back to working out?
Had you ever had an injury like that before?
Nothing. I broke my arm wrestling when I was 11 years old. So I broke both bones in my forearm doing that. One green break, one almost complete break. Like it's called like not a hairline, but we just have just a tiny little piece holding on. So that was my only extent of like major injury up to that point. And, they go back in, they set it with the cast and all that stuff. So I had that, but I had never really suffered from anything else before that. And so that's what got me on the next thing. So I'm like, oh,
wow.
Now this is magical. And I think everyone at CrossFit needs this because, I'm rehabbing. Meanwhile, I'm still coaching full time. So I'm coaching now and I can't move or do any of the exercises.
Yeah.
So I have to coach and I have to go grab, one of the members and say, hey, I need you to demo that movement for them. Wow. So I'm coaching, I'm living and breathing CrossFit all day, every day, 7 classes a day, doing all the programming, and yet I can't do any of it. I did a squat program for the first 2 or 3 weeks and got bored, and I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So it was a challenging time for sure. But as I'm rehabbing my own shoulder, I'm doing all these exercises. I'm looking around at the CrossFit gym, and I'm like, oh, that's not what that's supposed to look like. Or they need this, or they need this. And so that's where the final kind of soul searching moment hit. And I'm like, okay, I love this fitness. I can't make it a full-time job because it doesn't pay well enough. I just rehabbed myself. I have no idea what I did, but it works. How can I combine these two together? And that's where the massage therapy journey started coming. That same year, I actually met my wife. She moved to the area, and we were the only CrossFit gym around. She had done CrossFit in the past and was getting back into it. And so we met at the gym. And, she just kind of encouraged me to start that. My family was kind of like...
Encouraged to start
massage therapy. She thought it was a great idea. My family, I think, I'm trying to remember if they supported me or not. I think they thought it was kind of interesting. Like I was kind of hopping around. and they didn't really understand the whole fitness side of things.
Were any of them doing CrossFit with you?
No.
Okay, so they didn't understand.
No, they didn't understand. So I don't think they really knew what I was doing with CrossFit and everything else. I don't really know this. I just think they thought, okay, Jake stopped this job. Now he's doing coaching. Now he's doing this. But again, they're like, as long as you're helping out around the house, you can live here.
And granted, when you hear the word massage, I can see how they might think it's
right.
It's
exactly,
random. Yeah.
exactly. And the reason I landed on massage was I was looking into, chiropractic, physical therapy, all this other stuff. And a lot of it was a lot of schooling, like 4, 6, 8 years and a lot of money. And, I didn't have that much money. Like I saved a lot of my money at the first job. So I had a little bit of cash cushion. But at that time, I was like, man, I don't have the kind of funds to go to school. And I don't like traditional learning. So I was like, man, I don't want to sign myself up for 8, 9, 10 years, whatever, of schooling and that kind of a thing. And so we're looking into massage therapy. You can do anything soft tissue. And again, that's what the main stuff I used to rehab my shoulder was all soft tissue.
Yeah.
And so I was like, massage therapy, let's try that. And so I want to say that was 2016. So I would have been 4 years. Was that 2016? Yeah, 2016, 2017. That's when I decided to go to massage school. And I was going to combine massage therapy with my coaching. And I kind of wanted to have that, dual career. I was going to be a CrossFit coach and do massage therapy as well.
What was massage therapy school like?
Amazing. Amazing. So again, I told you I don't like traditional learning. There's only one class I did not enjoy. So I know people are familiar with like different schooling process. Massage therapy is a certification program. So kind of like more like a trade school, right? So most time frames for that are like 9 to 12 months to get into it. So it's a very, very accelerated learning process where we started at 8:30 every morning and you went to 2:30 in the afternoon. So that was every morning, 8:30, 2:30, 8:30, 2:30. And we do that 4 days a week. So it's almost like a full-time job, when you start out. So it's a 9 months accelerated course, but you're doing, basic biology, you're doing a little bit of kinesiology, medical terminology, you have some medical classes, you have your massage class. And then the only class I didn't like was we had a Word document typing class or something, and then like an English class we had to take. It was like mandatory. You had to take a couple. I don't know how it worked out in the curriculum. So I didn't like those 2 classes, but like everything else, I loved it. It was so fun to learn about the body and kind of start to understand, some of those self-massage practices I was doing on myself from Kelly Starrett, the videos I watched with him, started to make sense of like, oh, that's why that worked. That's how that process works. And so I love school. Like I had no problems, got good grades there, compared to high school, just because I enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah.
Besides those 2 classes.
This is just so interesting to see connecting all the dots, and it makes sense now how you have so many different skill sets. How are you balancing CrossFit training and coaching and massage at the same time? There was no balance.
Yeah, I mean, there really wasn't. So massage school, with massage school, I started it, and I was just doing that all morning. And so just to kind of give you a background, I would wake up, right, go to school, get off at 2:30, go to the gym. I would work out from 3 to 4, and then I would start training people at 4:30. And then I had 4:30, 5:30, 6:30 classes every night. So that was my daily routine. Fridays I had off, so it was usually studying, doing some chores in the morning, whatever I needed to do. And then Friday night, go coach the classes. I coached every afternoon. So the transition when I started massage school, I went from coaching those morning classes and the teen classes to just coaching in the evenings. The teen classes went away. We had another couple coaches, actually Paul Frisbee coached the morning a lot of times at that gym I was at. And so that was my schedule. Evening, CrossFit, morning, school. That was it. That's all I lived and breathed. Weekends would be a motorcycle ride with my wife, now girlfriend at the time. We'd go on motorcycle rides out in the Missouri Hills.
I didn't know you rode. That's awesome.
Yeah. We rode in Missouri. So, that was most of my routine right there. There was not a lot of balance for that whole 9 months.
Yeah. But you had a goal too. You had a goal you were working towards.
Yeah, I had a goal I was working towards. And so that 9 months went by really quickly.
Yeah.
Just because, I'm busy all the time, constantly working. Weekends would be programming workouts for the classes because I did that at the time still. And then when I graduated, Morgan we'll just call her Morgan. That's my wife, Morgan. She was transferring her job. She got noticed that she might be getting a new job, and they wanted her to go down to Florida and work there. So this is like right around the time I'm getting ready to graduate. And so we had a sit down conversation, and she was like, so what does this mean? Because we'd been dating for probably like a year, close to a year and a half.
Yeah.
Close to a year and a half. And so we just kind of had that sit down moment of like, hey, what's this mean for us? If you're moving. And she kind of goes, well, I'd like it if you came with me. And I was like, okay. And I was like, okay, well, my first answer is yes. But my second answer is like, I want to make sure that you see a future with this. So like, is marriage in the future if I move with you? Is that something that you're interested in doing? And she said, yes, but not now. And so that answer was enough for me. So I said, okay, let's do this. Man, not to get too deep into it, but I had two other girlfriends before I met my wife. One was in high school and one was right when I started CrossFit. And I don't know, it's kind of weird thinking about it, but I don't know if it's my personality of like always trying to go in head first, make things work, like get invested. But I feel like I did that with both those relationships, and they both eventually ended it. And I always thought, like, what did I do that like ended it? Like what happened? And I always wanted to have an answer. Like, how do I fix this? Like, what did I do wrong? How do I fix this? And my first girlfriend was just like, it was nothing you did. It's not working. Like, I'm just not interested, or it's like, it's just not working anymore. And then the other girlfriend just kind of cold turkey. She moved, ended up having a job that got her out of there. She was going to school at the university in our hometown, and she got a job, and she just left. And so I'm over here like, wow, like that was it. That was the end of it. And so there was something inside me that said, what happens if that happens again? And so it was a little hard decision to make, because I didn't want to go move to somewhere else. I didn't have my family as my support system, because up to this point I had been living at home, staying with my family through all of these transitions, having that thing to fall back on. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, early on with Morgan, I mean, I felt it felt different for sure. Like I knew it felt like we were a lot closer, and it felt real, and like this was going to be a lasting relationship. But still in the back of my mind, it was, what if one morning she wakes up and then she's gone, and it's just like, that's the end. And so I did wrestle for that for a little bit. So what I said was, why don't you go down there? You move down there, pretend like I'm not coming, move down there, stay down there for a couple months. I'll stay up here with my brother and go hunting with my brother, because deer season had just started. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'll stay up here for a month. I'm going to start working on a couple people here with my massage license, and then we'll see how we feel. And so long story short, like month and a half, I was hunting with my brother full time, doing a little bit of massage therapy. It takes a while to settle yourself in and start to create a name for yourself. So I wasn't working a whole lot with the massage. My brother and I were doing a little bit of construction work for a friend of mine at the gym. And then we were doing a lot of hunting, which was a great time. Yeah. It's one of my favorite memories with my brother, just getting to hunt most days with him. And then at the end of that time, we were like, yeah, I'm still crazy for you. And she's like, I feel the same way. So she actually came up a month and a half later, drove up from Florida, 16-hour drive, came back to get me. We packed up all my stuff. It fit in my little Honda hatchback, not a hatchback, coupe, my little Honda coupe, and her truck. We were able to get all my stuff, including my motorcycle. And she drove all the way down. So within 2 months, she did her own move where she drove down. She came back up, got me, and went back down there and helped me move back down and settle in with her.
Damn, man. Thank you for sharing that with me. That couple things that stick out to me. One, that was a big deal for you because you're rigid and you're not flexible. So I can see how moving would be a big change. You've only known Morgan for a year and a half at that point.
Yes.
And then two is, man, love will make you crazy. Love will make you go insane. It'll make you overthink things. And once again, that decision changed the course of your life. Again. So you moved down to Florida. What part of Florida?
We went down to Palm Coast is where we lived. Morgan worked at a facility in Palatka for her company. And then at first I didn't have a job, right? So I moved down there.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize this either, but every time you change states, you have to get a new license for your massage therapy. So the CrossFit cert, that's fine. That works anywhere, anywhere
Yeah.
in the world, even you can do CrossFit coaching at a gym. So that was fine. So with the transition, I didn't have anywhere to work, and I didn't have a massage license. And so every state's got weird little quirky rules that you have to follow and get into. So I had to take a few extra courses, and there was some paperwork that didn't get filed right. So it took me about a month and a half to 3 months to get my license for Florida. So that transition was a little bit of a process.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was actually a funny story. Morgan, her family grew up with golden retrievers, and she always wanted one. And so when we were dating in Missouri, she's like, yeah, but she would do this trip where she would go, long story short, she wanted a dog, right? She wanted to get another golden retriever.
Yeah.
And so 1 week out of every month, she would drive to Tennessee at another facility, and she would stay there for a week and help them. So she worked for she was doing jobs for different facilities. So she had that drive once a month, and then I was working a lot with school and everything else. So she couldn't get a dog when we were in Missouri. So she sends me a link on her drive up to get me of a golden retriever breeding, of a couple that did golden retriever breeding in Missouri. She just sends me the link and said, oh, it'd be nice to have a dog. And so I'm thinking, okay, she's willing to come up here, get me, move down with her. She wants to start this life together. I'm not really huge on another, responsibility or anything else at this time. I'm like, man, she really wants this dog. So she ended up reaching out to them, and then they kind of just like left her cold turkey. And so she was like, oh, I guess it's not meant to be, whatever. So I reached out, and I don't know if it's because my area code was local, and that was kind of the difference. But I reach out, and I get like an instant reply, like, yeah, the dog's still available. They had one golden retriever left. So we actually picked up the golden retriever when she came up to get me and take her back down there. And that 16-hour drive took 23 hours on the way home, because we had to stop so many times for this dog that had never been off the farm.
Dude.
This dog lived on a farm, like running around, doing everything else. And so we got this golden retriever and took it all the way down to Florida in a 2-day turnaround. So she drove 16 hours plus 23 hours in 2 days. One night, stayed up in Missouri. We picked up this dog all in that time and went back there. The reason I bring that up is because during the transition period, when we moved to Florida, I was waiting on my license to come in, and I was basically a full-time stay-at-home dog dad. While sending out applications, trying to find places to work, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm doing my due diligence, trying to find work for when I eventually get my license. Yeah. But that was my job. And that's when I was like, man, I understand why people have, why mothers stay at home. It's a full-time job for sure. Just all the house chores, taking care of the dog, doing the training, then still trying to do all that. I had a new appreciation for
it's sometimes harder than an actual job. Like it's doing everything at once.
Yeah. You're a full-time schedule maker, meal planner, cleaner, training the dog. I imagine, kids are taking them to all their activities.
Gosh.
And so I just got a new appreciation for my mom, and raising 8 kids, and that kind of a thing. But yeah, so that was an interesting transition period. And, I spent, I'd saved up a lot of money going to school. My first job, and I was actually able to pay for my school as I went through. But that transition period, moving, not having work, trying to, contribute to, rent and things down there, that those funds started to dwindle. And meanwhile, I'm just waiting on the state to allow me to work.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit of a transition period there for sure.
What's interesting, man? That's a big risk. Like what you did here, you telling this story back does not align with your rigid personality. And it's crazy because you had to be malleable and fluid. I mean, first of all, a puppy, you got a puppy and drove like 23 hours, which anyone listening, don't do that. I'm sure you'd
do not
idea.
Recommend it. Do not recommend it. And Jackson, he's still with us. He's 6 now, but yeah, he's a great little dog, but yeah, I do not recommend it.
So the puppy, moving to another state, which I guess you had lived in Florida before, but still another state, you were not engaged.
Not engaged.
So that was a big risk, man. And it's just one of the reasons I love doing this show is I believe that there are moments in people's lives that they make decisions left or right, A or B, and whatever they choose will fundamentally change the trajectory of their life. And clearly that happened with you because you and Morgan are married now and you still have Jackson, and life has been great since. So you moved to Florida. Let's keep going up until, how you got to Atlanta and present day where you are today. So how long were you in Florida and what did you do while you were there?
Yeah, just real quick hitting on your thing about those like key decisions in life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was probably one of the most defining moments to decide to go all in with Morgan. Was one of the best things. That's probably the best thing that's happened to me in my life, 100%.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely a defining moment. Continuing on the journey there. So I'm kind of in this transition period. I'm waiting on my license. It eventually comes. I kind of interviewed at a couple jobs, but one of them was like a spa setting. And I really knew at this point, I'd only been doing massage for 3 months. So I'm a new massage therapist. I graduated May that year and hunting season was October. So now I'm down there in Florida like November, December, just before Christmas. So I've only had my license for like half a year and really haven't been practicing much. Only worked on a couple friends back in Missouri. So I don't really have a lot of experience with massage therapy. So I do an interview there, and then I do an interview at a chiropractic office. So Massage Envy, and then this chiropractic office, and a couple other places. Still waiting on my license. Liked the chiropractic office, was okay with it. But we ended up going to a gym in Florida called Bearcat. It was in Bunnell, which was close to where we were living in Palm Coast. And they had like a really great community there. It was so fun. Like everyone's super tight, super close. Everything's fun. And every year they have this competition called the Reindeer Rumble. And so like, hey, you guys should do the comp with us. So I ended up doing the comp scaled with one of the athletes at the gym.
Yeah.
And his name was Tony. He's a character. But so we do this workout scaled, and when we show up, there's a lady there, and her partner got injured, and they were in the RX division. And they were like, Jake, you're an RX athlete. Like, we know you're doing scale, but like, you're an RX athlete. Why don't you just join in with Melissa and do the workout with her? And I was like, well, who's Melissa? Like, oh yeah, she's great. She's a really good athlete, and she owns this other gym down in East Ormond Beach. Like, you should just do it with her too. So I ended up doing RX competition and the scaled competition that weekend in there. And little did I know that she was a massage therapist. And she kind of got away from doing massage with the business because she just had she was doing too many things. And so she took a step back, wasn't doing massage therapy anymore, but she had a room that was set up for massage at her gym. So we had an awesome competition. I forget what order it was. I think we got first in scaled, and I got second with her in the RX division. So we did great. It was a great time, great competition. And she's like, we got to talking, and I told her what I do and everything else. And she's like, oh, well, do you want a place to work? I was like, and do you want to coach too? What? And I was like, wait, so you're telling me you have a room for me to do massage and you want me to coach? I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do. So what are the odds? Like the first few weeks we're in a new spot, we're getting lay of the land. We just do this one competition, and I had this opportunity right in front of me. And so I was like, that sounds great. But, I loved that Bearcat community. And they kind of were talking about coaching a little bit and potentially doing some stuff there, but nothing was set in stone yet. And I hadn't gotten as close with the owners of the gym yet. And so it was kind of hard for me because I was like, oh, well, I want to, they took us in. They're so gracious. And I also had this opportunity. So I talked to Morgan about it, and she's like, well, it sounds like that's the perfect situation. So why don't you just go ahead and do it? And so I ended up working there, going there. And her boyfriend at the time was like the head coach. And so he kind of took me under his wing. They had like a little intro thing. So he kind of taught me some really cool skills. Like I'd been coaching for a while, but like I didn't really think of it as like this organized structure of a class. So he ended up training me into it, started coaching there in the mornings, started doing the massage therapy. And then I ended up taking the other job at the chiropractic office too. So I was working at the chiropractic office every day of the week in the mornings. After I coached in the morning there, and then on the weekends I was doing massage therapy. What ended up happening was I was seeing 7, 8, 9, 10 people on Friday, and then I would see a few people Saturday morning. And our instructor at our school told us, you have to make sure that you're not overdoing it because massage therapy is actually one of the careers that have the highest turnover rate. Like most people don't even last 5 years.
Damn,
that's like the average length.
It's so hard on your body.
Yeah, so hard on the body. Yeah, to do that much work. So he's like, you just got to be careful and kind of make yourself some limits. So I found that out real quick because that chiropractic office, I got busy fast, and I was working all weekend.
Yeah.
And I had almost no days off. And my hands and wrists and elbows, everything started to hurt. And it was just a bad situation. But it was a great problem because I started getting busy. So I ended up making a schedule there where I'd work 2 days a week at the chiropractic office. I coached the morning classes, did the massage therapy. And that's kind of when I started doing a little bit of personal training. Again, happened organically.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple clients working on them. I had some regulars and they were like, hey, well, I really want to get better at pull-ups. So I want to get better at that. So that kind of started with a lot of skill-focused work. Like, hey, I want to get a muscle up. I want to get a certain movement or have a certain goal that I want to hit. And so I started training some of my massage clients and some of the other members at the gym, just doing that stuff. And so I got into an awesome rhythm there, started to kind of grow my business, both sides, stayed busy at the chiropractic office, stayed busy training clients and doing the massage therapy. I think I only had at most like 2 clients at a time in Florida. So again, my wife's work, about a year and a half there.
Same company?
Same company. She's about a year and a half there. And then I'm starting to feel like I'm dialed in. I've got my routine down. I know exactly where I'm going to be in the morning. I know exactly where I'm going to be here. I've got my regular clients and I feel like my business is growing, starting to see, actually money going into the bank account again. Because there was a time, when we moved to Florida that I've been living on savings basically, paying for school, doing everything else. And my car broke down. And the part was worth more than my vehicle at the time. I was just driving an old 2002 Honda Civic. And so I was looking at buying a new car and I had never taken out any debt. And so I was like, well, I guess I have to borrow money to buy a car. But I really didn't feel comfortable with it. So I ended up going to this CarMax, I think it was at the time. And they're telling me they're going to get me in this car, but they're going to charge me 14% interest. And I did the math and I'm like, so you mean I'm going to spend an extra like $8,000 on this car over the term? I'm like, no way, I can't do that. And so we weren't even engaged at the time still, Morgan and I. And she's like, well, what if I loaned you money for a car we pay cash for? And I was like, you'd do that for me? I was like, you would loan me that? And she was like, yeah. And I didn't really like it, but I was like, I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Because again, like, to your point, I'd gone all in, out of my comfort zone. All my money's dwindling. I just started working again. I have no money. I don't even have $6,000 in my name.
Yeah.
I think I had $2,000 in the bank account, maybe.
Oh my God, dude.
So she ends up loaning me $6,000. We go buy a little Ford Focus. And then I worked my butt off to pay her back as soon as I can because I hated owing her money. So that was like a 10-month process. But yeah, so just to show you kind of like, that was, again, I really wasn't in any, hardship financial position. Morgan was always like, hey, look, if you can't pay rent, whatever, I know you moved down here. She was so gracious about it all. Didn't say anything about lending me money. Never even mentioned it once, And so I definitely leaned on her a lot in that first year. So yeah, so you see I'm here, I'm like finally making it, finally seeing money back in the account, finally get that money back. And then she's like, I got something to tell you.
Oh, no.
And but my first thought when she said that?
What?
Here's the moment. This is the moment that always happens with my relationships.
She'll break up with you.
Yeah.
Fuck.
That was one of my first, in the back of my mind again. It wasn't like forward and present, but this always what happened with my relationships. But I think the hardest part about that is I can't control somebody else. And it's a hard thing to learn is like, I can't control what someone else thinks or feels. And so anyway, she tells me she needs to move again, needs to go to Atlanta. And she kind of worded it like, Atlanta's a bigger city. There's going to be so much opportunity there. And I'm like, but babe, I started over from scratch. I don't want to have to do it again. Oh, and I was thinking like, I got to get the license again, all this other stuff. So anyway, she's like, I need to make this move for my work. I've got to do it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I was like, all right, well, I'm all in here.
And real quick, how long from when she says that sentence, how long does she have until y'all have to move?
That is an excellent question. I believe it was October and we were moving in February the next year.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
That's quick.
I mean, she did try to give me a heads up and, I tried to go right into trying to get my qualifications again. Yeah. Reached out to Georgia. Hey, what do I need to do to get my license and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so here we go again. I'm like, all right, got to do this whole process again. And like I said, I like randomly did a competition and found my job. Like it was just such a cool thing. Yeah. It just like happened organically.
No, you did the hard stuff. You moved. You were flexible.
Yeah,
you did it all
was flexible. I was like, man, I don't want to have to do that again. And at the time, we were talking about going on a cruise. because we lived near Daytona Beach, and Orlando's got a bunch of cruises going out. And that was my intention to propose, was going to be on that cruise. And so that's kind of what I was thinking in my mind. And then meanwhile, she's like, oh, we're going to move. I'm like, well, that throws off my whole plan. Now we're not going to do this. I was trying to figure out how to do it, anything else. So that whole process, trying to tell people we're leaving, everyone's bummed at the gyms because they, we had the group from Bearcat and the group from East Ormond Beach CrossFit that I was working at. And just having to tell them bye and leave, and all my clients, it felt like a breakup for me and my clients, because you spend so much time, week in and week out, at least monthly. A lot of my clients, I say monthly. It's like, it's hard. It's like I'm leaving all these relationships I built and see what Atlanta brings, But again, her job moved her and going there. And one thing on my wife, when she first got hired, they're like, hey, look, you have the potential to grow very quickly in the company, and we want you to, but you have to be willing to move. And when she signed up, she's like, okay, I'm willing to do that. Knew. And so she knew what was kind of coming and all that. I, on the other hand, did not know about all that. So she actually moved. She worked in Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Florida, and then Atlanta. Those were she already had 5 moves, and she hadn't been working for the company for 6 years at the time.
Oh my God.
So there were 6 months Oklahoma, like 8 months in Texas, a year and a half in Missouri, a year and a half in Florida, and then Atlanta. So yeah, she let me know about that. And then I was like, well, I'm planning to propose, like all this stuff, like I'm all in, and so I was like, all right, we'll try Atlanta next.
Yeah.
And so, we went back and forth. Her company paid for like a couple trips to come up and kind of get familiar with the area. And so that was the last transition to where we are now, here in Atlanta.
And now you're here in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll pick up the Atlanta story. Let's break for the bathroom, come back and jump into Atlanta.
Cool.
All right, so we had our bathroom break. And last we left off, you had just moved to Atlanta, second move. What happens from there? You're basically restarting.
Yes, starting over from scratch. So our welcome to Atlanta was actually getting our rental car broken into while going to one of the gyms, trying them out in the area. So when we first moved here, we knew Morgan was going to be working downtown. This was 2019, early 2019. So we knew Morgan was going to be working at the GP Center. And we didn't know where we were going to live. So we're like, okay, well, let's kind of look at the area. We'll kind of get in there. We had some housing that was supplied for us, like a month, I think, from the company. So while we were doing that, we were staying in Edgewood. So we were like, okay, let's check out a couple places here. So we actually ended up going to a CrossFit box. Probably best not to name just in case anything else. Yeah. But so yeah, while we were trying
Edgewood Avenue in downtown Atlanta?
Do what?
In Edgewood Avenue in downtown Atlanta?
Yeah, in that area.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So we're new to the area, right? So we go in there, we have our rental car. And so I think at this time we were actually at a hotel still. But anyway, we were in our rental car and we had our backpacks in the back seat. Because that's what you do, right? We just have it there handy. And I'd been driving earlier that day looking at different areas of the town. And so we stopped at this CrossFit gym on the way out. Morgan says to me, she goes, that's my backpack. And I was like, out of the blue, like we're walking out of the gym and she just goes, that's my backpack. And I was like, what do you mean that's your backpack? She's like, and then she starts running. And I'm like post-workout, again, like CrossFit gives you all kinds of feels. So I'm like exhausted and happy and I'm like walking out of the gym and she's just like starts running. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then I look up and I just see this black truck just like zoom out of the parking lot. Well, she actually saw him walking away from our car with her backpack and I was oblivious. No situation awareness at all. I don't have to point that out, but she was aware. She kind of saw it happening and she just like runs after the truck down the road and they pull off. So that was our welcome to Atlanta. That's how it started. And we were like, okay, note to self, don't leave anything in the car. We actually called the cops. They came in and they said, oh wait, so you left your backpack in your car? That was their answer to us. We were like, yeah, it was in our car. We locked the doors. Yeah. He's like, yeah, you don't do that. That's on you guys, basically. And then they really didn't care. It took them 2.5 hours to show up, I think. But you could just tell like theft wasn't their main priority at all. So we lost a lot of electronics and she lost some work stuff. So that was the initial Atlanta welcome. Just got us used to the city life because I grew up in a town of 16,000 people. Palm Coast was like 100,000. So wasn't used to kind of the city living, very different kind of pace, vibe. Way of life here. So we figured out that you do have to be careful leaving stuff in your car. That's a problem. And so we're just like kind of in this transition period. So we were working with a realtor that was recommended to Morgan. And we were kind of trying to figure out where to stay. And again, I don't have a job right away. She's kind of working. So when we move here, we were in that temporary living situation. I just made it my full-time job to kind of get to know the area. So I was driving around. She had found some places on Zillow that she liked. So I was looking at those, and our realtor was like, "You don't want to live over there." We're like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Just trust me. You don't want to live over there." We're like, "Okay." So us not trusting him, we went to check out those areas, and sure enough, you don't want to live there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a picture in the right direction makes a big difference. So
Yeah.
like you show up at the house, you're like, "Oh, that was the house. No, thank you," and you go away. So we had this kind of exploration period trying to find a place to live. We had a budget we were trying to stay under, and there just weren't a lot of options in Atlanta. And so my wife ended up finding our condo that we live in now, still. So we kind of transitioned from the temporary living. I kind of made it my full-time job to try to get my license transferred and then find a place to live and kind of know the area. So we knew we wanted to be like northeast or northwest. So we ended up over near the Brave Stadium on the northwest side of town.
Yep.
And so made that transition to the condo. Meanwhile, I'm still waiting for work. I told you the process with moving from state to state can be quite an issue. And so Florida took me 3 months. It ended up taking 8 months to get my license for Atlanta.
Oh my God.
There's 2 main organizations that run the testing process for getting your massage therapy license. And one of them is basically obsolete. They don't really oversee any of the testing anymore. But Georgia has this rule where your school has to be accredited by that organization. So my school, once they were no longer relevant, just dropped the certification. So I actually, and thank you to my school for doing this, but that my school actually had to go back and recertify their program and then prove that when I took the program, it was the same program they were currently running for them to even accept my license.
Damn.
How crazy is that?
Shout out to school too.
Shout out to my school for
Yeah.
going through that headache of getting recertified. I don't know exactly what's entailed with it, but that was the last missing piece that took so long to get, along with some other stuff. And the way Georgia's system works is kind of the board meets every other month. So you basically, if you send in a new document, you have to wait. It could wait a total of 2 full months basically before they'll get back to you on your schooling. So that took forever. So I actually picked up Uber driving during that time. So we transitioned to the condo. I'm still waiting on my license, and I'm not confident I'm going to get it anytime soon. And so I pick up Uber driving, and that came about. Dude, it's such a small world. One of my good friends growing up was living in Chicago, and he worked for Deloitte, and he was down actually working with my wife's company. They were doing contract work for them. So he was flying into Atlanta. So we hung out a couple times, and he's actually the one that brought up the Uber. He's like, "Man, I get an Uber every time I come to the city. Why don't you try Uber? Why don't you try that out while you're waiting for your job?" So I was like, "Oh, sure, I'll check into it." So I ended up making Uber my full-time job when we first moved to the city. So I was just driving 40, 50, 60 hours a week, depending on the week, just trying to get that money coming in still. Because I didn't want another situation like Florida, where I'm just dwindling away on my savings. I wanted to be making money. So that was a really nice job that I had, kind of transition period. And of course I went all into it, geeked out on it. When are the optimal times to drive? When do I get the best kind of clientele? I realized I don't want to drive past 8 p.m. because that was not the kind of clientele I wanted to have a conversation with and chat with. So I ended up waking up early and doing a lot of morning shifts. I liked that, driving people to the airport. Usually you get people on business travel. Usually they tip because they're on the corporate card, so they can charge that to the company. And so I found kind of the optimal driving times and windows. And
you made it a business.
I made it a business while I was in a transition period.
This is thematic, man. I'm piecing your personality together. If you do something, you go all in. Yeah. Uber's interesting. Uber, because I had the opposite experience. I drove from 9 p.m. till about 5 a.m. on the weekends.
God bless you.
I was 21 when I did it. And I only did it for 6 months, but pretty much what you're describing. It was wild. If you want to have interesting experiences, to anyone listening, be a driver at different times of the night in a city, and it'll be fascinating.
Yes. Yeah, you can definitely make some memorable experiences.
You have good stories.
Sure. Oh, for sure.
You'll have great stories. So you were driving Uber. You guys moved to right by the Brave Stadium. Is that Marietta, or is that considered Marietta?
Oh, we technically have a Smyrna address. It's like we're right on the border, like Smyrna, Marietta. It's kind of weird with the stadium, how the addresses all work there. It's like very interesting. Side note, but I picked up a phone off the road that I saw on the road and tried to return it to the owner, and I couldn't get the screen to turn on. So I took it to the police station, and they're like, "Oh," at the Smyrna police station, I said, "Oh, we can't pick that. We can't take that because it's technically Marietta. You have to take it to the Marietta police station." Damn. And so like I kind of figured out that where we are is kind of a weird geographical position. But yeah, it's technically Smyrna.
So you're driving Uber. It takes 8 months to get that certification, which is crazy.
Yes.
But again, you're doing the most that you can with your time. What happens from there? You get the certification. What happens?
Yeah. So during that 8 months, I picked up Uber driving to make some money. But we also found the gym that we're still going to now during that time. So when we first moved to Atlanta, we tried out the box that our stuff got stolen at. You could know that made a bad taste in our mouth. So we didn't want to go back to that one. And we ended up trying a few other gyms in the area. But, every CrossFit gym kind of has its own vibe, its own community. And so you really, for anyone listening too that's interested in starting CrossFit, you really just want to see like the gym that you feel the most at home with and the most you vibe with the community. It's just it's kind of what you're looking for. So we were trying to find out which gym kind of felt like home to us and that kind of a thing. So ended up trying like 4 gyms total. And that's when we ended up going to Venture CrossFit. From day one, the owner was super cool. All the coaches were really welcoming, very encouraging. It was just a great atmosphere. And at the time, I told him about the massage therapy and I was interested in coaching. He's like, well, if you're interested in coaching, we can make that happen for sure. We'll just try a couple classes, see what you think, and we can just go from there. So they offered 3 free classes. So after our first class, we're like, we think this is the gym. After the second class, we know this is the gym. After the third class, I'd already talked to the owner about working there. And at the time, he had 16,000 square foot space he was renting out. And he had some office spaces. And he literally told me, when you get your license, you can set up in this room and we'll figure out payment stuff later. You can just start working on people here, not a problem.
Nice.
And I was like, man, this is happening again. Like all the stars are just aligning, it's coming in there. So started coaching at that gym during the time too. And so that was the process. I was coaching a little bit, driving Uber full time. And that was kind of that 8-month process leading up to when I got my license. During that time, he had to downsize the space. Long story short, had some, issues with the landlord, different things like that. And the space that was renting out the warehouses around us needed more space for their business. They had a party rental company. And so we went down to 8,000 square feet and he lost his office space. So I'm like, oh, what does that mean for me when my license comes in? And so when I eventually got my license, I was like, okay, well, I worked at the CrossFit gym in Florida, and that was my favorite setup. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of being at the gym, working on the clientele. Naturally, a lot of the CrossFitters came to me for body work and care. And so I really liked that atmosphere, and I really didn't want to work at another, office or a spa setting that wasn't, really into the sports and fitness side of things. So my license finally came in 8 months later, and I just sent emails out, cold emails to different gyms. Never been over there. I looked at where we lived, and we already knew the Atlanta traffic. I've been driving Uber. I know the Atlanta traffic. So I was like, I don't want a job that's clear over on the other side of town. So I was like, okay, we'll just keep it within the geographical area around the gym and all these other places. And I was like, I need to find a place so I can work. So I was like, hey, just sent out an email. I'm new to the area. I just recently got my license here, but I've been doing massage for a few years, got some experience. I'm also a CrossFit trainer. I'm looking for a place to do massage therapy. Do you think I could add value to your gym? And just kind of sent that email out, and crickets. So kind of made a secondary loop, sent out another one, third loop, sent it out. And a lot of gyms don't even pop that on the map. You'd be so surprised how many CrossFit gyms are in Atlanta, just like right around the corner. They don't even populate when you do a search for them. So on one of the emails, I think I probably sent out a few batches of emails, but there was one I sent out, and then instantly I got a response, like within the same day. He's like, yeah, man, come up, let's have a conversation and we'll go from there. So I literally set up an appointment probably that same day or the next morning. I think it was really quick. And I just drove up there, and that's 1490.
Wow.
Where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And the owner's name's Aaron. And I walk in, not knowing what to expect. And he's just, for those of you that don't know Aaron, he's a specimen, okay, built like a Greek god. So you walk in, it was very intimidating. But he's just like, hey man, what's up? How's it going? He's like, yeah. And so we just have a short little conversation and just talk briefly. He's like, yeah, let's do it. Just like that. Let's try it out.
He is that guy.
Yeah.
And real quick, when he says a specimen, he's Hercules. He looks like, it's just not fair.
Let's just say he has the nickname in CrossFit, Calf Daddy. Okay? Calf Daddy. So he's world famous for his calves.
Legitimately world famous.
Legitimately.
Yeah. And nicest guy ever.
Yeah, nicest guy, yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Super chill guy. So yeah, I mean, like it was a little intimidating walking in, but it made me feel at home really quickly and kind of showed me the space. And like the room was set up. So the gym I'm at there was set up for like a personal training gym originally. And so it's got really nice equipment, like high level turf and stuff. And then, he just kind of converted it over to a CrossFit gym. But the room I'm in was like a little like yoga Pilates studio. And so I walked in there. It's got like a mirror. It's got these nice wood floors, and it has like dimmable lights already. So it's like perfectly set up for what I need. And it has more space than what I was expecting. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure I went up back home, found some furniture, or, got another table and was like, all right, this is it. And so set up shop there since Venture no longer had the office space for me to use there. And so that was the first location I started working at.
Wow. And what year is this? 2019?
Let's see here. Yes, it would have been because April we moved into our condo. We moved to Atlanta. I started the process of getting my license before we even left. So I think I'd started the process in like November, December. So 8 months, August. Yeah, I think it's about October of 2019. So yeah, I think it was October.
Damn. One quick question going back to just your stories of being flexible and transitioning. Man, I can imagine that's mentally defeating to first you leave Missouri, you move to Florida. Okay, you're in love with this girl, now your wife, and things worked out and it was scary, but it worked out. You've got yourself settled and then man, everything just is the rug's pulled from underneath you. I have not had similar situations to that, but I've known what it feels like to kind of lose something and maybe have to rebuild. How do you and maybe you felt this, how did you not get stagnant, depressed, anxious, that almost paralyzed you to not take action? Because there was a time in my life where I had a few months where I was transitioning and I almost didn't do anything. I just didn't know what to do and I was fearful. And I'm sure people listening have been in that same place.
Yeah, so like you said, I like your system. I like a routine. And yeah, it's tough. It's hard to put into words exactly like what it feels like to go through that.
And did you feel all those ways and you just kept pushing forward? Like, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious because, dude, that's tough what you did.
Yeah, I decided I was all in with Morgan, right? So I knew that was the plan. And actually a very important part of the 8 months when we were here was I knew the trip, I knew the cruise wasn't going to happen where I wanted to propose originally. And so I ended up proposing at a park our first month in Atlanta.
I saw the video.
Yeah. And so that was like a key moment. And so I was like, okay, we're starting here. I want to propose here. So I just did the second best thing I could think of, which going on a walk with our dog, which is one of our favorite weekend activities. And I ended up proposing there. And so, that was an important step in the journey. But yeah, when I decided to go all in with Morgan, there was no other option. So work be damned, doesn't matter. I have to figure out a way to make it happen. And she did kind of clue into the fact that she may move again when we moved to Florida, but she thought it was going to be 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So I was expecting 3 to 5 years in Florida, which I think is what she was actually told as well, but it ended up only being 1.5 years. And so one of the things moving to Atlanta, I was like, realistically, are we going to move again? Because at the time I was thinking maybe I need to look at something else because it takes 1.5 years to 2 years to even like establish yourself in an area, because a lot of the work that I do is I get a lot of word of mouth referrals. People trust you and then they tell their friends. Their friends come to you, then they tell their friends. And so it takes time, because you're trusting your body with somebody, whether it's training or massage therapy. And so, that's one of those things that doesn't come, like you don't just want to just go anywhere to do it. So it takes people some time and it takes a little bit of friction to go into that. But yeah, I would say just keep looking for a way. Don't stop trying. And for me, the hardest part was just trying to build those new relationships every time. That's the hardest part with my line of work. Going back to, childhood, I was very introverted. So massage therapy and the Uber driving both were actually very good ways for me to come out of my shell a little bit.
Yeah.
So like when I was a kid, my dad, he used to make me go to the counter and buy stuff, but I didn't even like doing that. Yeah. And so it's kind of crazy to think like that was probably a good parenting moment on his point, but he would make us kids do stuff or go talk to people or be the one to like, hey dad, can I have a soda? Yeah, but you have to go get it.
Wow. So Would child Jake never think you'd be on a podcast talking like this?
100%. It would scare me, freak me out. And
Wow.
so the hardest part about the changes every time wasn't that we were moving, trying something new. That was kind of exciting. It was like an adventure. Like that wasn't the hard part. The problem was like, wow, I got to go talk to more people, build more relationships and that kind of thing. And so it's been a great way for me to grow personally with the moves. So I would say that they were pluses, not minuses. But to your point, during the moment, like, when am I going to get my massage license? It's out of my control.
Yeah.
I called every week at the same time. The lady knew me by name. She knew every time. I think she knew my voice because I'd call in. It was a Secretary of State's office. And it was like, you call them first and then they transfer you to the board. But then you can't talk to a board member directly. So you're always talking to the same lady. So I think they probably knew me by name. Like, oh, this guy again. I just can't wait for his stuff, you know? But that's the hard part is just, you know, building the relationships again.
Planting seeds and building roots is hard, man. And then when you get those ripped up and you change, it's scary. It's scary. So I mean it, man. I'm proud of you. Like, I'm genuinely impressed. We've known each other for years now. And again, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was to really understand your story. So to see, it's the farthest thing from a straight line. It's all over the place. But you know, you never gave up and you kept pushing. So fast forward to today. And by the way, for people watching, we have on M3 Therapy and personal training shirts. I've got the blue one. He's got the gray one on. This is your company. Was this established back in Florida, or did you get the brand started here in Atlanta?
So the M3 Therapy actually started in Missouri.
So all the way back.
Yeah, all the way back. So I was trying to come up with, you know, like, I'm starting a company. My dad was kind of like excited for me, like, hey, you're doing your own thing. I think it was kind of exciting for him too. So we're looking at branding and stuff. And we actually had a close friend that we knew back in Florida that are very dear friends to our family back when we lived there. And she actually helped come up with the logo.
Nice.
Without all of it. But yeah, I was just looking for names, trying to come up with, you know, what it was. And I'm like, well, I was just trying to think, like, what's the purpose of what I do?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? Like, why do I massage, right? It's not like we said, it's not the relaxing massage. It's not this. It's
No.
like, what's the purpose of it? And it's like, okay, well, I want to help people move better and I want to help people maximize their movement. So that's where the name came from. And I thought M3 was kind of cool. M3 Therapy kind of has a ring to it. And so instead of spelling it all out, like, just going with it.
And it works. And that really leads us into the next thing that I want to talk about. Well, we can kind of wrap up the story with present day. Going, you know, you initially mentioned this at the beginning. Present day, you are actively personal training, massage therapy, and coaching, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's my current schedule. So one day a week I coach at Venture CrossFit. I coach the evening classes. And then the rest of the week is the combination of the personal training and the massage therapy. Again, 3 different massage locations and then 2 places that I do the training at.
Yeah. And one quick note before I really dive into some healthcare and recovery and injury questions is to anybody listening, if you put the pieces together, what sticks out to me is it was never A plus B equals C. It was you had to try and try again and figure things out, because I think a lot of people 1000% have the soul searching moment. And if someone from the outside looking in today just walks in and sees who you are, excellent trainer, excellent coach, you've got this life built for you. And they're probably like, oh, you know, he just went to school, he just did this and it was easy and it was just one step after the other. And that just really sticks out to me. Do you feel that way telling the story back, that it was almost like a mountain of stuff that you had to get over to get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it now, it's like starting over, chasing your tail. What's next? How am I going to make this work? And yeah, there was definitely there was a lot of moving parts. You know, always the end goal. I feel like everything's kind of happened organically. And there's I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. And so there's a podcast I listen to, and he just says, if you serve people, money and the rest of it will come. So I think that's kind of always been my intention. Once I got into the fitness space, it's like, okay, if I'm going to coach people, I want to be good at it. I want to help them get to where they want to be. If I'm going to do massage therapy, I want to help people recover and get back at whatever they're doing, right? That's the purpose of it. I got injured. I wanted to get back to doing what I loved. And so I've just found that, the best way to do that is to kind of incorporate all these things together.
Yeah. It makes sense, man. And you do a great job of serving people. You're really committed to those people. On that note, let's go to where you and I met, and I want to use my injury as an example, because what I've gone through hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have gone through, and that'll segue into just health approach in general. What was your perception of me and what I was going through when we first met? And this is March of 2021 when we were introduced from Dr. Garcia.
I would say your body language is very reserved. You are very cautious. And I could tell you'd been through a lot. Yeah, that was my first impressions. And I kind of hadn't known, we met through Dr. Veronica Garcia, and she's just a very lively, energetic person.
Yeah.
And so she was telling me like, I've been working with Jordan for a while, but I think he needs some of the stuff that you can offer to him. And so she just said, basically, take care of him. I'm sending him to you. I care a lot about him, and kind of gave me a brief background of your situation. So I knew it was going to be a lot like that you had been through.
Yeah.
And when you walked in, you could tell you'd been through a lot.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I'd been through a lot. So from my side, I'd been through a lot. I honestly should probably count how many doctors and people I'd seen prior to Dr. Garcia and then you. I mean, it's anywhere from 2 to 5 a year for 5 years straight. So 25 plus of medical professionals being told, you're never going to bend over again. You're not going to twist again. You're never going to have the same life again. I'm always in pain. It's not being solved. Started working with Dr. Garcia, saw immediate results. She was making me feel better. And then she was telling me about you and massage therapy and training. And in my mind, I had kind of pretty much written off lifting properly again. I'd written off everything that we had done because I was just constantly in so much pain. So you and I had our first bodywork session of cupping and massage, which was brutal. There's no sugarcoating it. But I immediately had such a big relief in my body. I was like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I don't know if I've ever told you this. I think our first workout or our first mobility session, you made me do deadlifts, like bend over and pick up the bar. I was mad at you and I thought you were crazy for making me do that because I had just said to you, I was like, hey man, I can't bend over without being in pain.
Right.
And the first thing you make me do is bend over and start picking shit up. And I was like, did he not fucking hear what I just said? Like, I can't do this. He's not listening to me. He's like all these other people. And this is an old story that people have heard, but I want to share that because again, going back to what I said earlier, you've shown me my body is capable of so much more. So the first question I want to ask is, can you break down just one simple example of the hinge motion? Because for me, I bent over, and when I would bend over, I would have pain. I would have spasms. So my head was, stop, don't bend over, don't lift anything up. You didn't have that approach. And I want people to hear this because this exact approach can be used for almost any injury that people are going through.
Yeah. So breaking it down, the first thing you have to realize is, I think most people would agree, the body is designed to move. Okay. We have a saying we've talked about before, movement is life, right? I'm not the first one to coin that phrase, but you have to be able to move, and you have to be able to move to live. It's just the way that works. Now, a lot of people don't understand that there's, advantages, and your body's in the best position doing movements a certain way, right? So that's just what you have to break down and go from there. Now, if someone's injured and has a catastrophic injury, something caused from trauma, a car accident, there's things that produce so much trauma to the body, you have to heal that and get that fixed. Okay, so there's cases where you're not going to be able to move optimally,
like a break,
right? That you're not going to be able to support your load. You're not going to be able to support weight, whatever, right? So, the first approach is, okay, I don't know based on the damage that was done to your body or the surgeries, what your limitations are going to be as far as movements go. But because I know you have hips that work, and I know you have other parts of your body that work, right? Not just that, you're not just 2 discs or 3 discs, 4 discs in the back, right? I knew that I was confident we could get you moving at least better and achieving basic tasks, right? Like, I think one of our examples starting out was, how are you going to pick something up off the floor then if you're not supposed to bend over? Right? Is that how you want to live like the rest of your life? Is that what you're going to do? Or do you want to try this method of moving, trying to get the movement better and being out of pain? And so that's kind of the first approach, is just knowing you're designed to move, and let's see if we can move correctly. And then if we're still in pain, we'll try another method out and see what else we can get to. But that was my first approach with you, was okay. And that's kind of it. And going back a little bit, when you first came in, I would just want to preface, no one had sent me a 5-year background document of all of their injuries that they had been through. So I kind of had an idea before you even came in, what areas were injured. But yeah, I had no client ever that sent me a 5-page document of all the stuff they had been through. And again, when you came in, I was prepared to see, I don't know what I was prepared to see, but I was like, again, I knew you had been through a lot. I just wanted to go back and share
That's
that part of the
so
story. Yeah,
funny.
never ever had anyone
Yeah.
do that before.
For everybody listening, I to this day still have it. It's a Google Drive, and it's a folder that says health history. And actually, quick tangent: if anyone's going through any health issues or anything like that, it's really important to keep note of what happened, because when you work with professionals like Jacob, what you may think is not important is very important. And working with you guys, I thought my disc injury happened from when I felt it tear in my sparring match in karate. It wasn't. It was from 5 months prior when I fell off the cliff edge and I had a spasm 2 weeks later that I literally rode off. It wasn't until we worked. It was like, oh, that's actually where my first imbalances came from. So
Right.
I do have a document. It has all my MRIs. But that way, because also I was just tired of filling out those stupid forms every time, of being like, you know what? I'm not filling these forms out where I put X's where my back hurts. Just read my document and go from there. But that's funny.
Yeah. So I wanted to preface it with that. And then, after the first bodywork session, with the work that I do with massage, I do a lot of PNF, like neuromuscular kind of work, where you have either active or passive movement that you have your client do while you're working on certain tissues. And so after the first session, we were in different positions. I think it was a couple sessions before we started the training.
It was 2 sessions.
2 sessions, right? So we started doing that. And so, based on what you could do there on the table and certain things, and after feeling the different tissues, I'm like, okay, well, I feel like his body should be capable of doing these things. And so what else could be the problem? I know you'd worked with so many people, so I was kind of like, well, what else can I do? He's worked with all these doctors. He's worked with all these other people. And like, you're definitely an outlying case compared to a lot of people that I'd seen there. Like, I'd never had someone go through like a torn disc, your experimental surgery that you had gone through, all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, oh man, what's going on? But then I was like, okay, well, let's see what he's talking about. And that's when I had the idea, maybe we need to train. Yeah. Maybe I need to show you and we can work on things. So,
You're right. We weren't meeting for training at first.
No. It was just body work. That's all you were coming for.
You're right.
All you were coming to me for.
I didn't want to train. Yeah.
Yeah. That was not the intention.
I couldn't. And I say this with quotes for people that are listening.
Yes,
I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
I was told I shouldn't.
And so, based on the couple sessions, while we're in there working, we're talking, kind of going over stuff, you're giving me more of your background, kind of what had happened. And I'd written some literature from a couple of doctors that I like, and they talked about most people have disc herniations, they're not even aware of them. Mm-hmm. So disc herniation in and of itself is not an issue or a problem. It's just you may have to move more optimally in those situations. So it's not like necessarily the end of the world. So I was like, okay, well, if I kind of treat him similar to that, I think we should be okay. So I was just trying to get you to understand like basic principles of movement and then see where we could go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And one thing I had written down, you and I had talked about this the other day. Pain isn't the problem. Pain is your body telling you there's an underlying issue. Can you expound upon that? Because, man, as we've been doing more of this show and putting ourselves out there with content we've been doing, man, this is like an epidemic of people that are in pain that feel they cannot get out of it, and there is a way out.
Yeah. So I love that phrase. I would say maybe a slightly more accurate would be like, pain is an indicator, right? So like you're saying, you shouldn't necessarily be afraid of the pain. The pain is just telling you something. And so in your case, in your situation, what we found through our testing, all we did was go through a barrage of tests, right? Does this hurt? Does that hurt? Okay, try this position. Okay. And so we just did trial and error to find out what it is. And it turns out that you're really sensitive both to flexion, over reflection and extension with movement, but specifically just in general, you're just intolerant to extension. Your back cannot handle any excess of extension, right? And that's what we found.
And guys, when he says extension, like if I'm standing straight up, it's arching of my back.
Yes.
It's if I'm laying down and I arch my back. Kind of any arching movement, especially with loading on, hurts me to this day. So yeah, just for people know.
Right. And like if you were completely rounded forward the opposite direction, like bending over to your toes, that'd be full flexion, right?
Yes.
And if you do that with load, that's also going to bother your back too, which it would most people, because any flexion of the spine is the worst position your back can possibly be in. Generally, extension is not that bad. If you're overextended slightly, as long as you maintain that extension, you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. In your situation, you cannot have any overextension.
Yeah.
0. And so that's what we found out. And that was the importance of understanding the proper movement mechanics. Yeah. And so typically how it would work, let's take you as an example. Okay. You come in, you tell me I can't bend over. I can't rotate anymore. I've had doctors tell me I can't do these things anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was your situation. So come in, we started some body work. I do some tests, see where there's maybe lacking some movement, And then from there, we make a plan to get that movement back and then teach you how to use that movement correctly, right? So we had some issues with your hips externally rotating, right? We'd had no external rotation in the hips, so I knew that was a problem. So to make it real simple, think of your spine as 4 pieces: cervical, thoracic, you have your lumbar spine, and then let's say your hips slash sacrum, right? So the cervical and lumbar need to be stable. The thoracic and the hips have to be mobile. So if your hips aren't mobile, your low back is going to take over and try to make something happen for movement. Because again, we're designed to move and your body is great at adapting. So if you lack the mobility in the hips or your upper back, the thoracic spine, then your cervical or your lumbar is going to compensate for it, right? So we look for the imbalances in the massage room. Once I find those, I try to give people homework or things they can do on their own to try to improve those things. So they don't have to come see me as often, right? Because you can come see me every week if you want, but you have 6 other days of the week where you're not getting anything done as far as that. If you just, worked, went home, sat on the couch, right? So that was step 1. Like I said, we kind of figured out a couple of those imbalances, and then we want to apply it to movement. Now, movement, there's 2 basic rules. When we're moving loads, we want the back to stay in a neutral position, right? Which means we don't want the spine to change position, okay? Now, if you're braced, there's some exceptions to that, but just as a general rule of thumb, the spine should stay neutral during movement. We want to move from the hips. So anything squatting, deadlifting, picking themselves off the floor, sitting down on the toilet, just basic functions. We want to be moving from the hips, not from the back. Other rule is your shoulders and your hip joints. Shoulders are a little bit more mobile, but they basically function the same. They're both joints that circumduct. And so what you want to do is externally rotate. That's usually the best position to pull or squat from. Yep. So those are 2 basic principles, and you want to make sure that you're applying those to most of your movement. And so our journey with you was learning how to hinge from the hips. That was our main focus, and to keep the back in that stable, neutral position, which we found out eventually was you're able to get back to moving and bending over and twisting and all those other things.
Next thing, I have a bad back. I'm never deadlifting again. Can we burst this myth? Can you break down why a deadlift is? And guys, I also want to preface, don't fucking lift 400 pounds, 450 pounds. If you can't pull the weight, you're not going to pull the weight. Like, you're going to get hurt eventually. So I want to clarify, we lift with respect to my body now. We don't ego lift. We don't ego train at all. But that was a big thing for me to mentally work through, man. Like, I struggled for months out of fear. And I'm just curious. I mean, people tell me all the time, I can't do that. It hurts. I can't do that. It hurts.
Yeah. I mean, let's just go back. Like I said, do you want to pick something up off the floor? The answer is yes, right? So they tell, let's say your grandma walks into the doctor's office and she has a herniation in the disc and it hurts to bend over. And the doc says, yeah, you can't pick anything up anymore, right? So she goes to the grocery store by herself and she's trying to buy cat food or dog food for her pet, right? How is she going to get it from the floor to her cart, to the cart to her car, and then back over there, right? So again, we go back to movement is one of the most important things that we need to function everyday life. So by saying I'm not going to deadlift, you're basically saying that you're never going to pick something up again, which just isn't the case. So most of the time, the problem is not the movement itself, it's just how you're doing it. And so, I literally had doctors tell me, I've got some scoliosis in my back. It's twisted and rotated to the right. So I deal with a lot of hip stuff on my right side, and I have to do a lot of exercises in order to keep that from happening and keep that from tweaking. But I literally had a doc tell me one time, like, yeah, you got to be careful with those deadlifts. Like, I wouldn't do those, But it's just like, that's just the mindset, and it's just a different mindset to have. So my mindset is, okay, you've got to be able to perform daily tasks. Let's just figure out the optimal way to do it. And so that's the difference. You just don't be afraid of the movement, but to your point, I may not have a 600-pound deadlift, and I need to be okay with that, Yeah. And I mean, and maybe, your body is not in an optimal position to be able to do that much weight, but you still should have the basic, you may not be able to lift the most weight, but you need to be able to perform the task. And so that's where it comes in, right? Maybe 135 for me. Maybe it's 225 for me, right? Wherever that limit is. And that limit is where you can keep optimal form and still perform the task. That's your weight limit. And so, training, you can eventually get those weights up over time, but you shouldn't, if you've never deadlifted before, don't go to the gym and deadlift 400 pounds. Okay. My brother's the exception. He pulled 300 easy, right? But
he worked on
he worked and he was being guided well, and they were making sure he had good mechanics. So he was being guided through very well, but you can't expect everyone to be able to do that. No. So just know where you're starting from if you don't have a fitness background, and always prioritize your form first.
Yeah.
Form before intensity, always. That's the key.
Yeah. Before we jump into form, let's talk about tight muscles and rolling out and how. And I want to preface, guys, like all the stuff we're talking about, these are not blanket statements. I don't think you could say like 100% of that. Everybody's body is different. You know, there are exercises Jacob and I don't do. Power cleans is something that we've had issues with over the year. It's hurt. So we've not tried as hard on that when we focus on other things. But damn, I lost my train of thought there. We were talking about.
You were just saying about prefacing it with
form, rolling out in muscles.
Rolling out muscles.
Man, my hamstrings and my adductors and my psoas muscles. Can you just speak a little bit on, okay, you've got the mechanics down properly, but my hamstrings have been crazy tight. So we've done a lot of work on that. Can you just talk about how sometimes, if you're at a level 10 pain, maybe 4 of that 10 is because you're so tight and wound up.
Right. So just to go back a little bit, like to the initial assessment, like when I'm working on someone, when they're in my room and we're doing the body work, right? That's what I'm trying to find. I'm trying to find any imbalances, side to side, back to back, right? Is the left leg different than the right leg? Is the right hip different than the left hip? Because a lot of times that can cause torsion or torque into the body. So that's what you're looking for. So typically speaking, when you have an issue with your movement, when it's not working well, I address 2 things first, right? I'm a massage guy, so just preface this by saying, like, you go to a surgeon, they're going to look for surgery options. You go to a massage therapist, they're going to look for massage therapy. You go to a chiropractor, they're going to look for an adjustment, right? So you have to realize that there's implicit bias in whatever practitioner you go to see. And so at first, my mind's always thinking, okay, is it soft tissue related? Is something too tight, right? And so the very nature of working out or using your body, you break down the muscle fibers and they rebuild. And that process likes to shorten your muscles over time. As your muscle gets stronger, it becomes shorter and tighter. And so if you're not doing things like long stretches or soft tissue work to open those tissues back up, over time you're getting shorter and tighter. Perfect example, how many bodybuilders have you seen that have trouble touching their toes, reaching around their own body, right? Like even touching their own shoulders, right? So the very nature of their goal is to get as big as possible. Those muscles are shorting and they have a hard time getting into range unless they spend a lot of time on opening up those tissues.
Yeah.
So to your point, tight hamstrings, tight hip flexors, all those things can cause that muscle to shorten, pull on those hard structures, and then you have a harder time getting a certain position. So tight tissue can affect the movement quality. So that's the first thing you have to look at. Now you take someone who's super flexible, right? So you have someone who has no problem touching the toes, going around. Typically speaking, they're going to have problems with stability. So those fine motor controls, like keeping the shoulder in a good position and stable, that's what they're going to need to work on. And again, kind of like I've talked about before, like personal training kind of happened on accident. So that client that's super flexible comes into me, we work on the soft tissue, and they come back the next week and they go, yeah, it was fine. It felt better right after you worked on me. And then boom, I went to do my XYZ lift again and it started hurting again. And so they need someone to take the time to show them where to position, how to hold it, or be given exercises that help them become more stable. So that's kind of how I look at the body. I say, is it too tight because they're not recovering well after they train, or is it too tight because of something else? And another thing is you can get tight from just sitting too much, right? Yeah. If I live in this short position like this all day, every day, hunched over, shoulders forward, shoulders coming in, my spine's all rounded and flexed, my body's going to adapt to this position. So if I am sitting at a desk all day, every day, that's my job, and I don't ever open this up and stretch back out, I can get tight that way too. So it's not even a working out issue necessarily. So tissue too tight? Yes. Okay. Let's address that tissue. And now that's going to help us move even better because we can get to the position. That was my problem. I'm the tightest person naturally. When I played basketball, I couldn't go past my knees. When we would do toe touches in basketball, warming up, I couldn't go past my knees.
Damn. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how tight I am. So I'm the perfect case of way too much tension. And I didn't even really work out. Yeah. Right? Just the farm work was about all I did. But I'm a perfect example of that. So that's one thing with muscle tension. So that's something you have to address if that's the issue. But again, it's not always the issue. And then for those that have the flexibility and they still hurt, a lot of times they need to work on their stability. So I try to find one of those 2 things in every session that I have.
Yeah. Next thing to follow up on that is warm-ups. And you just made me think, by the way, everyone, Jacob and I have a running list of t-shirt idea names. And I just had thought of another one. Make warm-ups cool again, because
Nice.
people hate warming up. Let's talk about warm-ups. I've had 5 people train with me from the programs you've done, and none of them want to train with me anymore because the warm-ups are like an actual workout. Explained. So I think some people think of warming up as you jog for 2 minutes, you put your heel up on the wall, you do a quick hamstring stretch, and let's go. Break down, I don't even know if it's called warming up, activation mobility. What do we phrase it as?
Yeah, I would say the warm up is activation and mobility primarily for you. And then a lot of times you do want a component of raising the heart rate. So in a traditional setting, warming up pre-workout is supposed to be blood flow and dynamic openers. So basically not holding long stretches, not staying in one position for too long, but just going through it. And then a cool down or something you want to do after is more of those longer holds in that kind of traditional position. So you, with your warm-ups, we do a lot more openers and stuff like that for you to make sure that you can move perfectly. So a lot of my clients don't get the same warm-up routines that you do, right? Because it's on an individualized basis. But yeah, I think there's some disconnect with people thinking a warm-up is a jog on a treadmill and now boom, I go to work. The warm-up you should have, and this comes back to some of the CrossFit principles, but you want a general warm-up and a specific warm-up. The general warm-up, that's your heart rate. Get your heart rate up, go through some full range of motion, do some lateral lunges, do some different things where you're hitting end range positions just to warm that up. And that's one thing. And then your specific warm-up needs to be targeted for whatever you're doing that day. So if we're doing squats, we want to make sure we can open the hips. We want to make sure we're priming that hip hinge well. We want to make sure we're getting the hips activated to support the load, making sure our back stays straight during the lift, right? So that would be something that we would tailor that warm-up to be. Right. And like I said, and so that's going to be my approach for everybody. General warm up. Okay. And then the specific warm up. And then each person that I work with that I do personal training for, we figure out their biggest deficit and then we hit that every day. So we'll have a specific tailored warm up for an upper body day or a lower body day based on their body. What are they lacking the most of? Right. Is their upper back weak? Are they too tight through XYZ body part? And so that's where it become a little bit more tailored for them. But that's basically what you look for in the warm-up. So like you said, a little bit of activation, a little bit of mobility, increase the heart rate, and that's what we want for.
And if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I have, one of these things they're talking about, a pain in my knee, a pain in this, what are some resources you think you could recommend to people that they could maybe teach themselves a little or gain some knowledge?
Almost everything I've learned from YouTube, a couple courses here and there, schooling, just basic principles. But I think YouTube is an amazing source of knowledge. There's a ton of smart guys out there that post content for you to go look at. A couple of my favorite, there's a channel called Squat University, Dr. Aaron Horschwich, I think is how you say his last name. But he does a great job of explaining things and different things to test and try. But really, if you have knee pain, you have something else, first thing I would just do is say, you're in control. Okay. You're in control of your body. You can fix yourself. You just have to go through the testing process and figure it out. It's the same thing I do with all my clients, right? Go up, look at one of his videos, say, okay, that kind of sounds like my problem. Try the exercise. Did it help? Did it improve it or not? If you feel no improvement, go on to the next thing. Okay. Try the next one. And then you're doing that movement. Okay. Feels a little bit better. We're on the right track. And then do more specific research on whatever that thing was that helped you and just go on the journey one step at a time. But I think people need to realize, like I knew with you had spent years trying to find the solution to your back pain, right? And so you just never were satisfied with, I'm not going to bend over. I'm not going to twist. You weren't satisfied with that. You wanted to keep searching until you found, okay, we can do this again, but this is the steps that it's going to take. So Squat University is a great one. Kelly Starrett, the guy that got me started in it, he's got a channel called The Mobility Wallet. I think they call it The Ready State now. He's got a lot of great things. He talks about the mechanics of why things are happening and then shows you exercises to do to help fix it. And, not every exercise is going to help everybody the same. So just keep watching videos, keep searching for that knowledge, and then keep trying things until you find something that works.
Yeah. One of the things that you've given me knowledge on my health, on working out, on form, but probably the number one thing you've given me is hope. And I think when someone has their spirit broken, both mentally, physically, or emotionally, it's very hard to rebuild that. But the work that we've done together has given me back that hope. And you've almost helped me rewire my brain to believe in my body again. Maybe a similar answer to the last question, but what would you say to people that were probably in my similar mental state of like, man, I know Jacob's saying this, but I'm just mentally like, I don't think I can get anywhere again. I'm down. I'm lost.
Yeah, I was going to go back to one of our t-shirt ideas with that answer. It's you're going to have to put in the work anyway. So why don't you do it before surgery and not after, right? So you think about rehabbing from something. When you go to when you have surgery or you have a catastrophic event that requires surgery, they're going to make you do the rehab afterwards, right? So if you feel down in the dumps, you feel like you don't have the answer to your problem, you can't figure it out, you're not sure where to go, just don't stop searching for the answer. I mean, it sounds simple, but like you never gave up and you finally found a solution that worked to get you back to what you wanted to do, right? And so, I mean, it's easier said than done, but keep searching for what it is that you need to get better, right? Whether that's like what I did, I searched on YouTube till I found a guy that was helping me and he eventually got me back out of pain in my shoulder and my elbow, right? You searched, I mean, you found all kinds of things that working for you. I mean, I know you've talked about your story before on here, so you've gone through all kinds of different phases, but you just can't give up. You can't give up on yourself and you have to keep searching until you find the answer you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, one, thank you for coming on here today and sharing your story. I learned a lot about you and just sharing this health knowledge. We'll definitely have you back on in the future and we'll nerd out overall even more health stuff. Number two, thank you for all the dedication and hard work and commitment you've given to my body and my life. I wouldn't have this show today without you. I may not even be here without you. And I know you always say it when they're like, nah, man, you put in the work today. You inspire me. Dude, I love you. I appreciate you. You've really given me my quality of life back. That's why I wanted to have you on here. I think your story can help people. And together we can just keep making the world a better place and get people moving again and healthy and happy and enjoying their lives. So, dude, thank you from the bottom of my heart, man. I'm truly grateful.
My pleasure, man. Like I say, like you just said, you put in the work. I just showed you how to do it.
Thank you, brother. Well, thank you for being on here. I'm excited to see what people think. To everybody listening, thank you for tuning into another episode of Find Your Edge. As you can see, Jacob is the man. We appreciate you listening. You guys are the best, and we will see you next week on the next episode. Thank you, guys. Take care.